but overall, boat crossings are down quite significantly year on year, so that does suggest that the plan is working.
We've just witnessed drone footage of the French authorities handing out life jackets to illegal immigrants and then waving them goodbye as they head on their way towards the UK. So the French are actively helping and facilitating illegal immigration. In addition to that, the French forces did nothing to stop that huge migrant dinghy. In fact, the dinghy came out, then it went back to the beach to pick up even more illegal immigrants and then departed for a second time. During all of that, the French did nothing, and they even handed out life jackets and waved goodbye as these illegal immigrants head towards the UK. I think that's terrible. I mean that anyone who did cross the channel and arrive in Dover could be immediately deported within around about a week.
Give that a second, he's just dragging a line by the look of it.
Is that a warning shot towards us? I don't know.
Well, I was trying to work out.
Okay. The French officers could clearly see we were conducting an interview on the back of the fishing boat. They sailed extremely close to us and started firing gunshots, 11 live rounds. We could see the bullets hitting the water behind our boat. They weren't firing before their approach. They weren't firing afterwards. There was no notification of any kind of training exercise. So it did seem to me to be an effort to intimidate us.
The thing that I find, and I should say alarm clock Brits find so frustrating, Chris, and this is why I wanted you on this morning. Yesterday, finally, the unelected Messiah of Manchester stood up and said, to consummate fury from most of us, that Labour's plan to stop dinghy migrants
The Home Secretary has brought forward a very rigorous plan in relation to this, and let's remember, of course, the numbers can fluctuate, but overall, boat crossings are down quite significantly year on year, so that does suggest that the plan is working.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, good morning. Welcome to breakfast. I'm Peter Barnes, filling in for Alex Phillips. So don't worry, she doesn't now identify as a northern guy with a beard and is dressed like Andy Burnham, because I thought if I channel him, I might be able to understand the mess that the country has got himself into. Because let's be honest, that guy is so out of his depth. I mean, it's just laughable at this point, really. We are governed by an emoji and a lollipop, and we have got some real problems, and I'm not being funny. I'm about to do something very, very unusual. Let's roll this clip.
It's time to wake up, everybody. No, I really mean it. Just have a look at these scenes. This is happening today in Ceuta, the Spanish enclave in North Africa. Yep, it is Spanish territory. Tens of thousands, maybe more, breaking in to that little part of Spain. The authorities seemingly powerless to act, and yes, of course, they've declared a state of emergency.
I'm Peter Barnes. Nigel Farage is 100% correct. That's right. I said it. You never thought I would say it, but I did. He is 100% right on this issue, and he has been leading on the issue of immigration and the failure of Europe since day one. I will always give credit where it's due. And I'm not being funny. This situation that we're seeing in Ceuta, that's how I'm pronouncing it, by the way, for the rest of the show. If you don't like it, you can text, but that's what I'm going with. But in Ceuta is absolutely terrifying. It will come to Britain. There's a report out already that 48,000 apparently are on their way. This is not a drill. This is not something that has been a bit of hyperbole. This is literally happening, and it has been happening silently because Europe has been quite trying its best to make this go away. I mean, at what point do we suddenly think 60,000 migrants breaking into a country with the aid of another country over what seems to be a gas deal is suddenly going to make everything better? I'm delighted the French have suddenly realised that they can use the military, because we gave them quite a lot of money and they couldn't even find a Stanley knife, so that's a bit of a joke. But yeah, I'm delighted to say I'm going to be talking about this right off the bat with Philip Kisley, my good friend from the New Culture Forum. Good morning, Philip. How are you doing?
Oh, Peter, it's great to see you. And I'm another man, northern man with a beard, dressed like Andy Burnham.
If this was the BBC, we'd be getting a diversity grant, let's be real.
We would indeed, and here we are, you know, flying the flag for the North and looking like Andy Burnham.
Yes, yeah. So let's be real. Are we in a lot more trouble than we thought we were in when it comes to this Ceuta business? Because the migrant crisis, that's starting to feel a little weak when it comes to a title for this kind of problem now, if I'm being honest.
No, I mean, when this story broke, I couldn't look at it. I couldn't read it. I couldn't watch the footage because it was just too distressing, because this problem has always been in the post, and it is round the corner for us, okay? For those of us who've been saying for years and years and years that this is happening, it is happening now, and nobody would take any notice because nobody wants to think it's there. Nobody wants to think, as I say, it's around the corner. It's just really distressing. I mean, what are we talking about here? 60,000 people in one day. I was trying to think about precedents. I think in 2015, I think there were 11,000 people.
Yeah.
So we are talking exponentially more. Louise Haig said that this is not an invading force. Really? It's not an invading force. 60,000 men going on the rampage in European territory is not an invading force. So we need to get real about this. We need to, like I've had to do, we need to force ourselves to look at the detail, look what's happening, but also look at the precedents, look at the broader pattern, and think about how this is going to affect us, because they are heading this way right now as we speak, Peter.
I couldn't agree more with everything that you've just said. I did find it quite funny that the Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, said it was a cause for concern, and Louise Hay said it was extremely concerning. So, ironically, the further down the chain you go, the more important it seems to be, which I just think is just so typical of this Labour government, because, as you say, Philip, we have been banging on about this issue, not just on this station, but between me and you, I think it's all we ever seem to be invited to talk about, isn't it? And yet we are just having to, yet again, confront reality to people. I think this is the big thing for me. This situation is now undeniable across the European leaders. They cannot make this go away. This is 60,000 people. The Spanish authorities refused to use the military from the get-go, which I thought was a staggering act of cowardice, if I'm being brutally honest, by the Spanish government. I thought that will not make any sense to me, no matter how many T-shirts and blazers I wear. But I will say, this is also going to make the future of the Schengen Agreement very fascinating across Europe, because the Prime Minister of Italy, Meloni, she has already indicated that they're planning to withdraw, and it has caused many tensions across European leaders. How bad do you think this has to get for Europe before it actually wakes up, which is what Nigel Farage has said, and this is how weird it is. I agreed with him.
Well, this is it. You agreed with it, and I was, as you know, I kind of support reform, so I was delighted to hear that. But I mean, the open borders ethos is just so terrifying on so many levels, because it's only as strong as its weakest link. And Pedro Sanchez, that lunatic in Spain, is obviously its weakest link. But the interesting, you were talking about the use of language and the slight change in the use of language. It's taken us to go beyond catastrophe, for the plane to crash into the mountain before we start. When I say we, I mean they, I mean the government, I mean the establishment, I mean the mob. Before they start saying that immigration is a problem or might pose a problem. We were never allowed to say that.
No.
Okay, so that's really interesting that has changed. The problem is it's way too late. It's here, and it's all of these people that wouldn't allow us the conversation, wouldn't allow us the debate. They have landed us in this situation. Now, I was thinking about, I think it was before lockdown to about 2018, and the number of people coming over on boats was something like about 200 a year, something like that. And now we get that in 2 hours on a Monday morning.
Oh, I find it, sorry to cut you off, I find it absolutely hilarious that we don't have a deterrent system, we have bad weather. That is literally what stops people coming across. It's nothing to do with Shabana Mahmood. It's nothing to do with the Labour Party. It's nothing to do with the Home Office or any policy change whatsoever. And anybody who ever tries to peddle that is, quite frankly, a barefaced liar, as far as I'm concerned. We are very British about this, and we rely on bad weather.
We're very British.
It's hilarious to me. Sorry to cut you off, but it's just one of those things I can't stand. It is literally just gaslighting. And yet, I thought we were rid of the gaslighter in chief, Keir Starmer, and yet Andy Burnham seems to be turning the flame up quite high at this point.
Well, what do they do? I mean, I've been thinking about this quite a lot recently. I mean, what do they do? Do they say, well, our whole ethos, our philosophy, our open borders, international socialism, we're all one love. There's no such thing as countries, Peter. Imagine there's no countries. It's easy to do all of that kind of stuff. If they for 1 second say that they got it wrong, right? Actually, it's very dangerous to think about those hippy-dippy things and support them. We got it wrong. The second they say that, they admit that they've put women and children in danger. They admit that they put Jews in danger. They admit that they put our whole gay community in danger, because people coming over from places like Eritrea, Afghanistan, Morocco, they don't care about ages of consent. They don't care. Many of these men, and it does all seem to be all men. They hate Jews. They hate us. They hate the West. The fact that if Andy Burnham, if Louise Hay, if the establishment say, yes, we got it wrong, well, where do they go from here? So they're never going to be able to do that.
I couldn't agree more with this. I've always said that the moment these people look at the damage they've caused, and I lay a lot of this at Angela Merkel's feet in 2015. She opened the floodgates. She started this. Her legacy is a legacy of misery and blood, as far as I'm concerned. Because let's be real, people like to throw their passports to the bottom of the channel. They don't throw their beliefs and their cultural practices. They bring them with them. It is the great lie of multiculturalism. You cannot have people who come into the country that do not share our values and our culture. You just can't. The idea that this was ever going to work. Again, I've got the T-shirt, I've got the blazer, I'm trying my best to understand how this works, but I just don't understand how, when you are confronted with 60,000 people, you go, it's a concerning issue. This should have rocketed to the top of the list, which it already should have been on, and yet we're getting nothing, because I think you bring up a really good point. This is about reality hitting the European leaders right across the face. It is about the concept of borderless Europe and all this kind of Schengen-free, everybody, all hold hands and sing Kumbaya. That lasted about as long as 60,000 migrants entered Spain. I mean, that's how long it lasted. Once this happens, I do think this is a major turning point, and I really do. And I was just wondering, do you think that people like Maloney, you've got to get France is probably going to shift to the right? We're hopefully going to shift to the right in some form or another. Right across Europe, people are waking up to this, electorates are. Do you think that they are going to actually start voting on the issue of immigration and linking it directly to public safety?
Yes, I think people will, but I think I don't want to be a harbinger of doom here, and I hate coming on the show and just
that's
saying,
my job.
Yeah, that is your job. We can't both do it.
It's true, true.
But it just feels, as I said before, it's always after the catastrophe. It's always after the plane has crashed into the mountain. Oh, we've got a problem here. So what do we do? So we're always backpedaling. Meanwhile, things have fundamentally changed. The culture has changed. We're in that much more difficulty. Welfare has ballooned that little bit more. So it works on several levels. So there are these, great big flashpoints which say, oh, look, something terrible is happening. But beneath all that, the churn of the change, once you go beyond a certain level, you can't go back. And it comes down to demographics. You talked about cultural practices before. Everybody avoids that. But we never used to have things in this country like gang rape. acid attacks, honor killings, all of those kinds of things. So the culture generally changes. And what we're seeing now is, you know, a differentiation between the cities and urban life and rural life. So there's a sense of, there's a certain kind of Britain in the multicultural cities, which is very, very different from Britain elsewhere. You map that onto Europe, and okay, you think about Angela Merkel and you think about Germany, and they've got a lot to repent for. So in a way, you can understand the mindset if you can't understand the actions. But we don't have that. We fought against National Socialism. We stood up for good. There is no reason on earth why we should open our borders and repent because we have done nothing wrong. Okay, so I think all of these things, it's a very, very complex mix, and we need to, it's almost certainly we need a generational moratorium, I think, on immigration. Mass immigration has to stop. We need a breathing space. That's the key thing. And then we need that space not only to regroup as a nation, but to think strategically where we go from here, because we are talking about massive philosophical change, Peter, you know, and thinking about ourselves as a different country, kind of how we were before all of this, before 30 years ago, but different because we're looking into the future. It's a massive project, Peter.
Oh,
and
without a doubt. Yes, I couldn't agree more. And also, I lay this at the feet of the people that do want to have open borders. You are not helping anybody if you just flood Europe like this, if you flood the UK. If you want to dump this many people into the UK and expect our infrastructure to support it, you're having a laugh. Because I'm just looking here, there's an updated death count for the Ceuta crossings. That's 67. That is, for me, that is 67 people whose blood and death is on the hands of the people that encouraged them to come here, that actually said, yeah, get on the boat, we'll give you a free hotel, we'll give you a free doctors, dentists, all of this stuff. You put them on the boat. You made them come here. You offered Shangri-La and people came, and there was a consequence to that. There is a real human cost that they will never look at. And I just wonder, again, it's the big show question for the rest of this is this actually the turning point? Are we going to wake up? Because I have a big fear this is going to be considered, oh, it's just a one-off. Oh, it's just a freak accident because of other issues. We're not going to focus in on this like we really should do.
Yeah, well, that's how they're trying to frame it, aren't they? They're not saying it's an immigration. They're just saying, oh, it's an instance of illegal immigration. Well, it's a big instance of illegal.
Just a tad, yeah.
I'll tell you how things will change, Peter. The people who are, you know, the Queers for Palestine, the people who are going down to Dover, the border, Folkestone, all of those places, and saying all immigrants are welcome. You know, those people from very affluent places, once these Moroccan men and people like them get to those very affluent places and pretty much, you know, plant their flag there and cause trouble and create crimes and rape people and all of that kind of thing, because there will be criminals and rapists within 60,000 men, okay? That's when things might just change. But the probability is that those people who want open borders will just flee off to their farmhouse in the Dordogne and look over and say, oh, well, what a shame, never mind. And that's the problem.
I think you're bang on there, because what will happen is more gated community, private security for them, we get to fend for ourselves. I really feel that is the inevitability of this. Anyway, Philip, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm sorry we can't be any more happy and jolly, but thanks again. So if you do want to find, again, I'm going to open this question up. Is this actually the turning point? Is this the event that's going to make Europe and our leaders here, not just in the Labour Party, but in the Conservatives, in the Liberal Democrats, in the Green Party, in all these instances, are they actually going to wake up and say that this is the moment that Europe's open door policy has failed and is actually putting people at risk? I want to hear all of your thoughts. That's on 03444991000. You can text the show as well. Don't forget to start with talk. That's 87222. You can tweet me or post me. I don't think we've ever decided on a phrase for that one, have we? But it's at talkTV. And also, I love a WhatsApp message as well. So that's 03444991000. We're going to take a quick break. I'm Peter Barnes, filling in for Alex Phillip. Do stick around. We've got more to come.
49,000 people are leaving Morocco because apparently it's war-torn. But Jet2 this morning are offering 20% off a trip to Morocco for a week. Which country in Europe wipes everybody's backside but its own people? Here.
This is a huge football story, folks. UEFA has now said no European nation will participate in any FIFA competition so long as proposals to create a company to run the World Cup remain alive.
Across on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to Talk Breakfast. I'm Peter Barnes filling in for Alex Phillips. Yes, we hit the ground running very quickly there, and we've got a lot of great messages coming in about the Ceuta crisis because, I mean, we do have to be very real. The word invasion is not offensive. That is literally what happened. The Spanish authorities refused to use the military straight off the bat. I do not understand that, and I never will. And it will hit British shores. This has a knock-on consequence. The Shadow Home Secretary, Priti Patel, has openly said so just the other day. But looking at some of your comments here, I feel like this is a great one from Lee. It says, I feel we could be invaded by Russia as easily as we have been as we have been by illegal migrants in the UK and Europe. Stick around because actually I'm going to be talking to Sir Richard Dearlove later on, talking about the more security aspect of this. So I'll be sure to ask him that, and definitely everything else that's going on with Russia. And then this is a good one from Barry as well, just really quickly. I cannot understand the decision that a person arriving in this country without papers can be listened to and accepted as honest. No one travels abroad without papers. Anyone coming in without papers should be treated as dishonest, and any claims for asylum rejected. Barry in Sunnyside, I could not agree more. Good people don't throw passports in rivers and seas. I'm sorry, I just don't think they do. You might drop it accidentally, fair enough, but when you are, you know, seen doing it and you have no reason to do it, I think we should be asking some stricter questions. But while this issue is going on, bringing everything back to a home focus, Andy Burnham has announced, and I do agree with him on this one, a review into the prisoner release scheme, where we're going to see, apparently, rapists are set to be exempt from the Labour plan. Now, I don't really understand why they were ever in the plan in the first place, because this is not the first round of releases that we've had. I doubt it will be the last round of releases we've had. And, you know, it all came about because obviously the people scheduled for release which was actually has been halted, included the two people who were involved in the death of PC Harper. Now, that death was brutal and awful, and I will not ruin your breakfast with it, but we should remember that very clearly about what these people are capable of and the people that Labour Party are letting back on the streets. So hopefully to cast a great light on this and explain it to me and to all of you at home, I'm delighted to say Danny Shaw is joining us, the Home Affairs commentator and former advisor to Yvette Cooper. Good morning, Danny. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Peter. Yeah, I'm doing very well, thank you.
Great. Now, I've tried my best. I've got the T-shirt, I've got the blazer, I'm going full Andy. Explain to me why rapists were not exempt the first time round. Because this is not the first release, it's not the second, it won't be the last. So exactly why did we think it was a good idea to put these people back on the streets? What's the thinking here? Hopefully you'll be able to explain it, because I genuinely have been trying to understand it.
Just go back a couple of steps. First of all, our prisons in England and Wales are massively overcrowded.
Yes.
The prison building did not keep pace with sentence inflation, which meant over the Conservative years there were less than 500 net new places provided, which is why the Conservatives under Rishi Sunak and then Labour had to introduce early release schemes in order to release the pressure valve. If they didn't do that, prisons simply wouldn't have enough space to accommodate everyone who was sentenced. The projections are that the prison population is going to carry on rising by about 3,000 per year for the next 5 years. And even with a big prison building programme, which is going on at the moment, that still won't be enough to accommodate all those who are going. That's why the government has introduced another early release scheme in the guise of earned progression. What they're saying is that people who are given a fixed term sentence, so not a life sentence, but a fixed term sentence of 4 years, 6 years, 8 years, whatever, will serve 1/3 in custody if they behave well, if they conduct themselves appropriately in prison. and then they will be released after a third. So that, at the moment, it's 40% that they're released under. For more serious prisoners, their release at the moment is at the 2/3 mark. That will move to the 50% mark. Now, that scheme, that earned progression model, is baked into legislation that was passed by Parliament earlier this year, and it was due to take effect at the beginning of September. But as has been pointed out, it applies across the board. So no matter what offence, whether you've been convicted of drugs offences, firearms offences, robbery, shop theft, rape or manslaughter, it applies. If you've had a fixed term, you will be coming out early. Hence the complete uproar over that. Why, you asked the question, why weren't rapists excluded? My answer to that is because ministers have made a terrible blunder. They thought that they didn't have the room to manoeuvre, and they thought that they would be able to get away with it politically, and they haven't.
See, that's the big phrase I don't like, be able to get away with it politically, because this is, these people have done horrific things, and from what I remember the last time round, there was a lot of victims that weren't warned about this, and the next thing you know, they suddenly saw the people back in the communities, and I think that must have been not only terrifying, but I think a sense of betrayal, I think, by the state to keep people safe, to at least give them a pamphlet. We're pretty good at giving leaflets out, but this one seems to have missed the printing deadline. But again, I find it interesting. Were the Labour Party warned about this when they were passing this legislation? I vaguely remember it going through, but obviously we've lived through so many monumental events in the last 15 minutes. Keeping track of Parliament is pretty difficult at the best of times. At the moment, it's a circus, and that's an insult to circuses at times. But again, were any ministers warned? Were charity groups pounding the doors saying this is going to happen? What was the situation there, realistically?
Yes, there were warnings, and the Conservatives in particular, I think, tried to put an amendment. So they tried to amend the legislation so that certain groups would be excluded. I think the view was probably taken, look, we just have no wriggle room here. If we start excluding some groups, we're not going to create the space in prisons, so we can't do it. But I think, it was a massive mistake. I blame the former Justice Secretary David Lammy, who was in charge of the legislation, and his team of ministers and advisors for not spotting that actually there are some offenders who have committed the most serious crimes, that they really should not be part of this scheme. And you have to find the space somehow. You have to construct a scheme whereby some rapists, people convicted of manslaughter, people convicted of the most serious domestic abuse offences are not part of it, are not seen to benefit, and victims are not getting those emails or letters saying, I'm very sorry to have to tell you, but the guy who sexually abused you or raped you is going to come out of prison earlier than you thought.
I know, I just don't understand how that could ever have happened. But then, obviously, I've been around Whitehall a long time. I understand how, things do get missed. And I'd like to think this was an honest mistake. But I do think, this might have been, again, that phrase, I see what we could get away with. Because when we talk about opening space, there is the Labour Party have apparently paid a total of £6.5 million of taxpayer cash to persuade criminals to leave the country. This is a story, I have to admit, this only just popped up on my radar, but again, we're paying people who are criminals to not appeal and to leave. Why? Why can't we just kick criminals out? Why are criminals here? What's the situation here? Because this just seems to me of a kind of a blanket, we can't deport anybody, here's some money, please get on a plane. That seems to me what, just as a kind of boilerplate kind of look at this actually seems like.
It sticks in the craw, doesn't it, Peter?
Yeah, it really does, particularly as a taxpayer as well.
Yeah, I completely get that, and I completely get that everyone that's listening and watching to this will go, you did what? You're paying these people who've been convicted to leave the country when they have no right to be here anyway. But you have to be pragmatic, and you have to understand that actually this is a huge saving for the taxpayer eventually, because what you're basically saying to foreign criminals is, if you leave before the end of your sentence, we will give you some money to facilitate your return, and that will actually save in prison costs. It costs over £50,000 to lock up one prisoner for 12 months, £50,000. So if you think you're paying £500, £1,000 to a foreign national offender to get out of the country before the end of their sentence, I see that as a cost saving, even though I don't like the sound of it, because otherwise they'll languish in the prison, they'll stay in the prison, they'll cost the taxpayer a lot of money, they may appeal against their deportation, try and use whatever means they can, employ whatever lawyers they can to lengthen the process and make it more difficult. It's a way of smoothing their passage out of the United Kingdom.
Yeah, again, from a kind of pragmatic point of view, I do understand it, but it does seem to me that we're rather kind of avoiding the rather large elephant in the room of why don't we just change the law so it's much more, you know, easier to get rid of foreign criminals over, you know, domestic ones, for example. You know, if there are criminals, they're our problem. If they're not a foreign, if they are a foreign national, it sticks in the craw. It really does. But I know it's replicated in other countries, and it does seem to be working. So I'll give it a little bit of leeway. But anyway, Danny, thanks so much for joining us this morning. I hope you have a good day. Let me know what you've got to say on these two things, because obviously we've got dangerous people back on the streets. We've got dangerous people coming into the streets. We're then paying people to leave, which just seems bizarre to me. I understand what Danny's saying there about the long-term kind of, you've got to have the pragmatism to actually run a government. It's difficult, I will say. But again, I want to hear what you've got to say. So that's 0344 499 1000 to get through to me in the studio. Don't forget you can text. Don't forget to start with Talk. Otherwise, Talk Sport get it, and they're very confused very easily unless it's a ball-shaped thing. They've no idea what they're doing. So don't forget to start with Talk. That's 87222. Again, you can tweet me over at talkTV. And I do love a WhatsApp message. But we'll just take a quick break now, and then after this, we will see what's coming up. Stick with me. I'm Peter Barnes.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Talk. I'm Peter Barnes. Just really quickly, we have a little bit of breaking news. This is a statement from Spain's Interior Minister on the issue in Ceuta. This is from Fernando Grande Marlaska Gomez. I think I butchered that, and I do apologise, but that's as close as you're getting. Is giving an update right now. The situation in the enclave. He says numbers of confirmed dead has now risen to 77. He blames the surge of the crossing on the actions of mafias, human traffickers, and the people who take advantage of vulnerable people. Gomez insists that all resources, including police and military personnel, were immediately made available and that normality is returning to Ceuta. Yes, OK. We'll leave it at that, and we'll get back to this story in just a moment, because I do want to get to this next one with Helen Joyce, who's the Director of Advocacy Sex Matters. This is on a really interesting story that has been a long-running thing in the background, really, and it's never really got the amount of attention I think it rightly deserves. This is to do with children can be recruited, we'll get to that word in a moment, for a puberty blocker trial the High Court has ruled. Now, there were failed attempts to stop this from even happening in the first place, but I was really hoping, Helen, good morning, by the way, that you could talk our audience through what's happened, where we're up to, because this seems to have been all over the place, and that's saying something even for the High Court.
Yeah, I mean, it's extraordinary, isn't it? Like when people ask, when opinion pollsters ask ordinary people, do you think that children should be giving life-altering drugs because they're confused about what sex they were or they think they might want to grow up to be transsexuals or transgender? like overwhelming majorities of people basically say, are you clinically insane? Of course not. Children are too young. That's a very strong moral conviction. So it's hard to understand how this trial was ever even suggested, let alone that it's got permission. So it came from the Hilary Cass review, which had many, many good things in it, but it had this poison pill in it, which was that she said there isn't enough evidence about the basis for using puberty blockers, so let's do a trial. And she has doubled down in recent months, which is terrible because she has such a good reputation and she's thrown her weight behind this trial.
Yeah, that really does surprise me because I always thought she was one of the sensible ones, if I'm being honest. And it's not a big number of them, if we're being honest, on this issue, is it? But yeah, she's doubled down and yeah, so what? I remember this kind of got pulled and everyone was very happy about it. And then obviously these things, you get the right to appeal. And it seems to have, again, now that we're rocketing ahead with it, I don't like the word recruited, if I'm being honest, because that makes it sound like children can make a choice with then legally not allowed to. So why are they allowed anywhere near this? And I'm going to be brutally honest. If you are going to offer your child up for this, I don't think you should keep the child. I think you might be a bit of a threat to that child's long-term safety. I don't know if that's a bit strong, Helen, but I don't know. I
do have to address that. I do have to address that. You know, parents have been lied to for years and years and years about this. They have been told by the NHS, although it has stopped saying this, that these drugs are reversible, that all the effects are reversible, as if you can pause a child's development during puberty and then just start it again and it's like nothing happened. I mean, this is a precious time when children turn into adulthood. And the word recruited is a word from clinical trials. Like you, I feel very iffy about it, but that is a word.
Yeah, it's one of those. I've just been interviewing somebody about the prison release scheme, and he said "sticks in the craw" is, I think, a very good phrase for that word recruited. But sorry, do continue.
Yeah. So basically, what happened was after the Cass review, the government rightly stopped any provision whatsoever of puberty blockers, either on the NHS or privately, and it said because of very serious concerns about their safety. But it left a loophole, which is that it could be done in a clinical trial. Now, most of us really who campaign against this genuinely didn't think that permission would be forthcoming for such a trial because there are such obvious, massive ethical problems. But to our great surprise, they created a trial. And it's the worst thing about this trial, in my opinion, apart from the fact that it's obviously harming the children in it, is it cannot possibly tell us any useful information. All it does is it gives some children the drugs that they want now. And remember that these kids have been groomed online to think these drugs are life-saving. And then some of them have to wait a year, and then they ask them what their moods are like. Their short-term mood. It's a short-term mood questionnaire. So obviously the kids who get it now will say, hooray, my life has been saved, I feel great. The kids who have to wait will say, oh my goodness, I feel terrible. So I can tell you right now that this trial cannot possibly tell you anything of the sort that Cass said was needed, which is how best do we treat children with gender distress. It literally cannot do that. But the judge basically just believed what the various regulators and King's College London, which is running the trial, said. And I mean, you know, I get it. He's not a specialist. I should say for your audience, I have a PhD in mathematics and used to work for the Royal Statistical Society and wrote a lot about medical trials. So you can really trust what I'm saying here about this medical
100%. Yeah, your knowledge of statistics is greater than mine, put it that way. I see a number and I run out of the room, if I'm being honest. I'm not good at this stuff at all. But again, I find that fascinating. The actual trial is just a kind of, what is it, like a multiple choice questionnaire? Are you like circle the smiley face? Is that
it's a questionnaire.
It's
a questionnaire about your mood. The main outcome is a questionnaire about your mood. It asks you lots and lots of questions, and it also asks a bunch of stuff about, you know, have you socially transitioned at home? You know, how's life, basically. And I mean, the really extraordinary thing is that Hilary Cass is still defending this on the basis that it's going to give us information, which it won't. But also, she says that it will reduce the amount of prescribing that's, you know, outside the NHS and, you know, maybe getting drugs online and so on. But that's not what the trial was designed to do, and it's not actually following how much prescribing there is outside the trial. So we can't answer that either. It's the most worthless science, and we are harming children for something that, you know, up front we can tell is worthless.
Yeah, that seems staggering to me that, you know, as I read the story, I just presumed it would be some kind of, we measure kind of, you know, bodily fluids, we measure all these kind of sciencey things that I don't really understand, that, you know, I'm relying on other people to actually explain to me. That rather than just a mood questionnaire, which I'm not being funny, I will fill that in an afternoon and be all 4 different moods, possibly, you know, depending on how hungry or thirsty I am. I mean, I'm very basic at times. But again, if we know the answer to this, do you think that this kind of study was just done because they could do it. Do you think that's realistic, what they've done? Because the loophole existed, they've exploited the loophole. They didn't have to do it, but they've chosen to do it to push the agenda, for want of a better phrase, forward?
I mean, you have to wonder that. I should say that they are going to be checking some things about bone density and brain scans and the rest, but that's not the main outcome, and it's voluntary, you know, so it's not designed to find those things out. It's also a small number, and obviously a small number of children being harmed is better than a large number. But that means that any results that you get are also suspicious or suspect, because you just don't have what's called the statistical power to believe the outcome. I mean, why are they doing it? You know, the last 20 years has seen a big movement inside medicine and elsewhere in society to say that it is possible to be born in the wrong body, or to be a boy who really should be a girl, or a girl who really should be a boy. And, you know, we have been pushing back with great success against this. Yes. But these people are not giving up without a fight. And puberty blockers have a strange totemic status in this fight. You know, they see this as being the thing that enables them to say, you can't tell what sex somebody is. Because if someone has their puberty blocked and then they grow up, they are much harder to tell that they're really the sex they are, because they've been stopped going through puberty, obviously. And by the way, they're also going to have their normal brain and body development permanently disrupted. They're going to be sterile if they go on to cross-sex hormones. Many of them then get operations to take out their sex organs entirely. You know, this is a life-altering thing that changes a child's trajectory in a way that they think is good, but anyone stepping back from it just thinks is incredibly harmful.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best summation of this entire thing I've heard from anybody, and I think it is very, very well put. But I will say that, you know, born in the wrong body, one of the people I think has been at the forefront of this is J.K. Rowling. I think she really has put women's issues and the safety of women and the actual, you know, what a woman is. You know, I cannot believe we had that debate for how many years, and how much money did that we waste on a court case to come up with what, you know, common sense. But yeah, I find this story quite interesting, that Amnesty has apologised for branding J.K. Rowling's Rape Support Centre anti-rights, apparently. Yeah, because I know that J.K. Rowling, she's put a lot of her own money, she puts her life on the line. I know that she gets a lot of online abuse and in-person abuse as well. And it just seemed to me that, you know, they've said it was somewhat of an accident. I'm not being funny. You know, I like to give people the benefit of the doubt, but an accident on that, again, you could pull the other leg. It might be early on a Saturday, but do pull the other leg.
Yeah, I mean, Amnesty have been saying that anyone who says that, you know, sex is biological sex is real and more important than what people say about their gender identity, Amnesty has been calling all of us who say that anti-rights for years. They say that we are the same as, you know, people who want gay men and women forced out of society, that we're the same as people who don't think that women should have any reproductive rights, that we're all conservative Christians, that we're incredibly well funded by the American far right. I work for one of these organizations. I can tell you that is categorically false. The money is on the other side of this fight. And and this is not a mistake, because they brought a report out saying the same things a few months ago, but they didn't name Byra's Place, which is the rape crisis centre that J.K. Rowling fully funds. Their big mistake was adding that to this report, the recent one. And, you know, she's a woman who's got the money and the power to actually fight back when she is, and when Byra's Place is defamed. That's the only reason, in my opinion, that they're apologising now. They didn't apologise for the previous one. They haven't apologised to the rest of us. Not by name, anyway.
My rule is always, if all your accidents trend in one direction, it's not an accident. I mean, you know, it just can't be. You know, nobody makes that many mistakes about this kind of, or these kind of issues using that kind of language, and it's just a mistake. And I do not understand how we just think, oh, they said sorry, so it's fine. It's not fine. You besmirch people, you call people horrific names, you've hounded them out of society, and somehow they think, oops, we wrote a report, so therefore everything is okay. It's patronising, and it really does think that they really do think that they're on some kind of moral high platform on this, and I do not understand why.
Well, they wrote to their own supporters after putting out that public statement of apology, basically apologising for the apology and saying that they're not going to stop doing the things that they're doing. So, I mean, you know, forgive me, I just really do not think that they are doing anything here that they haven't been told they must do by their lawyers. That's certainly how it looks to me. And I don't know that this is over. And also, by the way, the puberty blocker thing isn't over either. You know, there's a possibility of an appeal, but there's also political action against this. There are politicians, good MPs, who are working cross-party to try to stop this atrocity.
See, that's what I love to hear. Cross-party. You know, this shouldn't be a political issue. The safety of children is not a political issue. I mean, the fact that we even have to have that sentence said, I find deeply concerning about modern Britain. But Helen, you have my full support. Keep up the good fight, and I'm sure we will have you back on Talk very soon. I hope you have a good day. Yes, so tell me, you know, why are children being, and I quote, recruited into this? Why have we got people, 60,000 people flowing into Ceuta? Why have we got prisoner release? Why have we got all this stuff? I want to hear what you've got to say, so don't forget to give us a call on 034 499 1000. Stick around after the break. I'm Peter Barnes. This is Talk.
49,000 people are leaving Morocco because apparently it's war-torn. But Jet2 this morning are offering 20% off a trip to Morocco for a week. Which country in Europe wipes everybody else's backside but its own people? Here.
This is a huge football story, folks. UEFA has now said no European nation will participate in any FIFA competition so long as proposals to create a company to run the World Cup remain alive.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to Talk. I'm Peter Barnes, filling in for Alex Phillips, so don't worry, you don't need to change your radio, don't need to change your TVs on a YouTube or anything like that. She hasn't turned into a northerner in a t-shirt and a blazer. She's not Andy Burnham just yet. But before we get into everything Manchester, because as we know, the Greater Manchester Mayor was last election results came in and they are kind of a mixed bag. We've got a lot to do over in the north. I, for one, am very happy. But I will say, you actually get somebody at Talk who knows how to do a northern accent, because it has irritated me since Makerfield that, you know, everyone talks like that. It's not. It's a lot deeper when you actually do the northern accent. But we will get to that in just a moment. I just want to read some text out because they're becoming in thick and fast, because these issues are something we've got to talk about. And yeah, I just want to look at this one from Paul. Says, try closing the borders, then you may have some space in prisons. I'm so sick of this government. I couldn't agree more. You know, when you let people in, they commit crime, they have to go somewhere. You know, it just seems to be that thing, common sense, but that doesn't seem to exist anymore. So if you just kick them out with no recourse to appeal, we'll save even more money. Agreed. Very much so. That's JB regards in Aberdeenshire. God, we're everywhere, aren't we? And just finally, morning, Peter. Who'd have thought a minister appointed with no experience of his brief makes a catastrophic decision to release convicted rapists? Did any of the plethora of civil servants in the department challenge this? Why not deport the 10,000 foreign nationals first? Great show. Thank you very much, Mike. And I couldn't agree more. We blame politicians for a lot of things, and rightfully so. They do not operate in a vacuum. There is an entire structure of civil servants, special advisors and party officials that work around ministers and cabinet secretaries. It's about time that we started holding them accountable for the decisions that they make. But as I was saying, we're going to turn to Manchester now, and I'm delighted to say I've got Henry Murison here, who is the Chief Executive of the Northern Powerhouse. My God, all these Northerners, we are definitely getting a grant from the BBC. That's a former Labour advisor as well. He's going to talk to us all things Manchester. How are you doing this morning? You OK?
Morning, Peter.
Morning. Right, OK, so let's dive straight in, because this story, I have to admit, I did laugh a little bit with Angela Rayner. I mean, she's been accused of misleading the public. I mean, is it Groundhog Day? Because that seems to be a repeating story just a little bit, of rather playing with her CV. It's what I call doing a Jonathan Reynolds. You know, it started to look like the cabinet started to look like the usual suspects, and I think Rayner's like Kaiser Sose, you know. She's the quiet one that, I'd say quiet, well, she's not really that one either, but yeah, I'm going to say, do you want to talk us through this? Because it seems to me that she was a home helper whilst being a trade union activist, and those seem to have been merged and kind of muddied up a little bit. Do you want to try and explain this for me and everybody watching at home?
So, I mean, far be it from me to suggest the Telegraph have tried to find something out of potentially nothing.
Now.
Now, I mean, and obviously their reporting is always entirely balanced and entirely even-handed. But I think my reading of this is, for anyone who's ever worked in local government, and I'm going to get very nerdy now, so hopefully I won't lose you too many listeners this morning. You do have people, you might agree with it, you might disagree with it, who as part of in their work time are given time off to do trade union duties.
Yes.
And so it mainly resolves around the fact that when Angela Rayner was a care worker, and she absolutely was a care worker, that is in no way misleading, she was at times given time off from that to do work for Unison, who were her trade union. And the Telegraph are claiming that by referring to that as still being a care worker, because she was still a care worker, she was being paid for being a care worker, and she was just being given time off to work for the union, that somehow she's acted in a misleading way. Now, I'm not some sort of closet best friend of Angela Rayner. I've met her a few times. I know some of her team relatively well, but I'm not some sort of paid up member of the Ange fan club personally or anything. I do think this is a bit disingenuous, because we say all the time we want politicians who've had real jobs. And Angela Rayner did a genuine working class job. We talk very positively about the fact we need more people to go into care work. She has campaigned relentlessly to get better rights at work for those people and to get them respected for what they do. She seems to have succeeded under the current government, and Andy Burnham has made improving the way we treat carers one of his top priorities. So I don't see a huge issue here. And I think, again, you can say, is the cabinet a particularly skilled or talented group of people? I think they are pretty talented. I don't think any of these CV crimes that you refer to are that serious, if I'm honest.
I think I'm just going to have to cut you up on that one a little bit, Henry, because my big problem is this comes down to trust. This comes down about the fact that you're going to get up in front of the public, say one thing, and you're not being fully truthful. Fair enough, it might not be the greatest crime in the world. Trust me, we've got other politicians who are more than capable of doing all that kind of stuff. But when you have... You know, you're the housing minister that doesn't understand stamp duty. You talk about the workers' rights bill. Most employers seem to think that it's somewhat have been a kind of a great barrier to employing people. So it's not necessarily as wonderful as we've made out. And then also you have this idea that she pocketed £17,000 after doing a little bit of a 180 and getting her old job back. I'm not saying that these are, you know, great stains on her character, but when you have one hit and then it's another one and then it's another one, the public, rightly or wrongly, starts to build a picture of a person who seems to hide behind the fact that she comes from a working class background a little too easily and uses that as a shield. I have to admit, I'm from up north as well, and it annoys me no end when people often say, oh, but she's from a council estate, as though that gives her free rein to break rules and to be given a little bit more leeway than if they were a conservative man who went to Eton.
I mean, I don't think that's entirely fair, and I think there is an element to which the fact that she's a woman who speaks in a certain way does make her a very easy target for some in the press. Not for you, Peter, and you've not spoken about her in a way that's disparaging, but other people sometimes do. And so I think my view would be, I think you can argue that the way in which she presented her CV probably made her appear as someone who has done a lot of work in the public sector. I fundamentally don't think there's a lot of smoke and fire here. I mean, I think for anyone who understands the rules on how trade union facility time works, You are technically doing your real job when you're doing that trade union work. She wasn't, for the time she was working for Unison, largely being paid by the union. She was still being paid by the local council, and she was, I'm pretty sure she'd been being paid at the rate largely of a care worker.
Yeah.
So I mean, if the job pays that and that's what it's legally called, I don't think this is part of a pattern. And I think there is an element of, now that Angela has come back to frontline politics, that anything that looks vaguely like it might be a story is worth having a go at, because then you can bring up things that may have been now dealt with. And the HMRC obviously have looked at Angela's affairs and have said that it was a genuine mistake. And I think the problem we've got is that I think our tax rules are too complicated.
That I do agree with. As a guy who pays an awful lot of it, yes.
Yeah. So I think in all of this, I think Andy's government is seeking to present itself transparently as what it is. And I think it is largely doing that. And I think, of course, people in certain publications will want to make a certain political argument. But I think the Telegraph maybe made a bit of a mountain out of a molehill.
Maybe.
And if they knew a bit more about how local government works, they would understand
if anybody
that
actually
legally
understands
she's not misclaiming anything.
That's fair enough.
On the technical side, she's absolutely right.
On that one, I will agree with you. However, if anybody actually understands how local government works, they're also lying as well, because it's all smoke and mirrors. Nobody actually understands how any of that works. We just all hope the bins get collected, and, you know, we might have a lollipop man every now and then. But moving swiftly on, because we did have a brand new mayor in Greater Manchester, a lovely lady called Bev Craig. I have to admit, a bit of a new one on me. Tell us all about Bev. Tell us about Manchester Mayor. You know, what's been going down up in the north?
So Bev Craig might not be a household name down in that there London.
That there London.
But she is very much a known quantity in Greater Manchester and around the north of England. So she's run the City Council in Manchester for a number of years. You'll have heard in the kind of Manchester debates about Sir Howard Bernstein, and then the leader of the council, Sir Richard Leese, who was leader for a long time. She was the person who replaced Sir Richard when he stood down. And those are pretty big boots, and she's more than filled
Just
them.
a tad. I actually met him one time, and I was like, "This is that's a statesman." If I'm being brutally honest, I'll give credit where it's due. That is a guy that got stuff done, and I do not envy anybody taking over that kind of role. I won't lie.
So I think, I would say in some ways, taking over from Andy Burnham, as much as I'm very fond of Andy, is probably in no way as intimidating as that probably would have been.
You just need to like the Smiths, isn't it? Isn't that the rule? Because I've got the T-shirt and the blazer. I just need the eyelashes. Apparently, somebody has texted in saying all I'm missing is the eyelashes.
I mean, there's no way I could ever pass for Andy, so I'm not going to even try and adopt the garb. And I think Bev, I think I said today in the Times that a lot of Andy's legacy is her legacy. She has been absolutely at the centre of this. And again, without boring your listeners to death, the way that the mayoral model works is that outside of London, it's not just the mayor. The council leaders in the different areas get a seat at the table as well. Yeah. And obviously Bev has been running the most significant in terms of scale of the boroughs in terms of economic heft. And she's largely led on many of the kind of business and economic issues. So she's worked very closely with a number of my colleagues and myself in the business community. So she is a very experienced operator. And because now Andy obviously since he left that job, has upgraded it. He's going to give her a share of tax revenues. He's going to give her a lot more power.
That is something that's
quite
interesting,
This job is
now
more powerful than the one Andy left.
It's a lot more powerful than the one Andy left. And I think he realised the big problems that he faced by not having that power. But, Henry, I am on a time limit. I'm so sorry to have to cut it short, because I could talk Manchester all day and talk Northern because nobody else understands what we're saying. But anyway, thanks so much for joining us. Do have a great day. Everybody else, do stick around after the break. I want to hear your calls. It's 0344 499 1000. You can text, tweet, WhatsApp messages are always appreciated. And yep, I'm Peter Barnes. Stick with us. This is Talk Breakfast.
The Home Secretary has brought forward a very rigorous plan in relation to this. And let's remember, of course, the numbers can fluctuate, but overall, boat crossings are down quite significantly year on year. So that does suggest that the plan is working.
We've just witnessed drone footage of the French authorities handing out life jackets to illegal immigrants and then waving them goodbye as they head on their way towards the UK. So the French are actively helping and facilitating illegal immigration. In addition to that, the French forces did nothing to stop that huge migrant dinghy. In fact, the dinghy came out, then it went back to the beach to pick up even more illegal immigrants, and then departed for a second time. During all of that, the French did nothing, and they even handed out life jackets and waved goodbye as these illegal immigrants head towards the UK. I think that's terrible. I mean that anyone who did cross the channel and arrive in Dover could be immediately deported within around about a week.
Wait a second, he's just dragging a line by the look of it.
Is that a warning shot towards us? I don't know.
Well, I was trying to work out.
Okay. The French officers could clearly see we were conducting an interview on the back of the fishing boat. They sailed extremely close to us and started firing gunshots, 11 live rounds. We could see the bullets hitting the water behind our boat. They weren't firing before their approach. They weren't firing afterwards. There was no notification of any kind of training exercise. So it did seem to me to be an effort to intimidate us.
The thing that I find, and I should say alarm clock Brits find so frustrating, Chris, and this is why I wanted you on this morning. Yesterday, finally, the unelected Messiah of Manchester stood up and said to consummate fury from most of us that Labour's plan to stop dinghy migrants is working. This, Chris, despite the fact that 1,000 illegal migrants have still come into this country in the last 9 days since he became Prime Minister.
Je suis un député dans le Parlement du Royaume-Uni. Why have you allowed the migrants into the water? Why haven't you stopped them?
Our order is to let them go like that.
Your order is to let them go?
We just have to say to them, don't do that, it's dangerous.
So your orders are not to intervene?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome to Talk. This is mid-morning, as I've been reliably informed in the gallery. They've been keeping me on my toes, so don't worry. For those who don't know, I'm Peter Barnes, filling in for Alex Phillips, who sadly couldn't make it. I think it's a train situation, but yes, so don't panic. She hasn't turned into a northern guy with a beard, just so we all know. It's 2026, but things aren't that mad just yet. So good morning. I do hope you're all well. I'm getting lots of texts, lots of tweets. I will get to as many of them as I can. I am asking today, will the Ceuta migrant invasion be the turning point in Europe's open door policy? I want to hear everything you've got to say on this, because I think it is such an important moment, not just for Europe, but I do think it's an important moment for the UK and the concept of borders. I know they seemed a little unfashionable for a little while there, but I think they are back with a bang. You know, the little black dress of you know international security. But yes, we're going to get straight into this, because I'm delighted to say that one of my favourite people and somebody I've always wanted to have a conversation with, I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Sir Richard Dearlove, former head of MI6. I'm been a fan of yours for a very long time. I've always sat in the presenter friend chair, so we've never actually had a chance to say hello, Sir Richard. But I want to dive straight on in here. I do hope you're well this morning, but we've got a lot to cover, and I want to get as much information out of you in particular when it comes to this Ceuta crisis, and realistically, what this means for Europe. Because I'm asking the audience today, is this the turning point? Do you think this 60,000 people storming into Spain, apparently with the help and aid of Morocco itself, is the moment that Europe suddenly gets its act together? Or am I barking up the wrong tree entirely?
Well, I think it's a demonstration of the vulnerability of European borders. But Ceuta has been a known backdoor into the EU for a very long time, and it has frequently been under siege from migrants from the African mainland. I mean, it's this Spanish entity on the North African coast. I think the problem, probably, as we've seen it, is twofold. There was a judgment in the Spanish High Court recently which forbade Spanish authorities for intervening against migrants arriving in these, there are 2 Spanish enclaves by sea. I mean, that was seen as giving a sort of green light for almost uncontrolled immigration into these enclaves. And Pedro Sánchez, the very corrupt and very controversial Spanish Prime Minister publicly endorsed that judgment. And I mean, the other aspect is that there's a very sensitive relationship between the Moroccan and the Spanish governments, particularly over these enclaves. And I bet something locally happened which maybe caused the Moroccans to, demonstrate the fact that they could overwhelm these enclaves by releasing large numbers of people. I mean, it is really worrying because it shoves a horse and cart through the whole idea of Schengen control of the borders of the EU.
That's what I really wanted to dig into, actually, because my idea of Schengen is literally the idea that you can walk from one end of Europe to the other completely unimpeded. Is there actually any security apparatus at all in between states within the central and continental Europe? Because I know it's one of those things that we talk about in a very abstract term. We don't. I don't really know the full detail of it. I'm hoping you could kind of illuminate me on this one.
Well, the Schengen theory is that once you cross the border into the EU, you can move freely within the EU. I mean, in practice, it's not quite like that because there are various governments in the EU that are worried about that degree of freedom, the lack of control. So there are certain borders where there is surveillance and control. And you've had a demonstration of that recently from the Italian government, Meloni, where she's announced that, she's putting controls on Spain because of this complete loss of control. I mean, there are certain EU countries which have been incredibly tough, like Italy, and some of those in Central Europe, where they built, border fences, and they exercise huge amounts of control to just prevent this sort of thing happening. I mean, the Greeks, who are very vulnerable to these sorts of activity, have been incredibly tough, and frankly, just lock up anybody who arrives illegally and then deport them. So, I mean, there's varying practice across the EU, but unfortunately, Spain is very much the laggard, and the Pedro Sanchez government is pretty poor in its performance on controlling its borders.
Yeah, I was going to say
too little, too late.
Yeah, wasn't it? I think it was earlier this year, or maybe just before Christmas. I can't quite remember, where there was a kind of amnesty for. I think it was 500,000, if not more. There is a track record for Spain on this stuff, and I don't really blame other European nations for turning on Spain, saying, "Well, wait a minute." Schengen is a part of a deal where you do have to have concepts of a border in some degree, and it is actually putting the rest of Europe in danger, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I've been recently in Spain at a conference speaking. I mean, this issue came up. I mean, a lot of the Spanish political parties, not the ones in power, are incredibly worried about this and are looking to impose, serious controls. But at the moment, you have that amnesty for immigrants, and you have a government which is very sympathetic to this judgment handed out by the Spanish High Court. So it's a real problem for Europe. And yeah, it does have a symbolic significance across the whole of the continent. And, this is a known backdoor. It's been a problem for years that people have been pushing into Ceuta, and there's another enclave called Melilla, and it's an easy way in.
Yes, it seems to me that yet again that we knew there was a problem, or a government knew there was a problem, and it rather didn't do anything about it, looked the other way, and it's been exploited, and therefore it seems to be average citizens that are not only paying the price in terms of tax, but also paying the price in terms of safety and the kind of the cultural impact that uncontrolled mass immigration like this actually has.
Yeah, and what's a little worrying is we have a new prime minister, and the media is full of laudable policies on social care, but these are long-term, slow-burn issues. The urgency of immigration into Europe. Have I heard Andy Burnham say anything about that at all?
No.
Single statement. And we need a government that gets to grips with what's worrying so many people in this country.
I could not agree more, and I hopefully somebody in the Labour government may have heard that, but I doubt that. I sadly doubt it will land on ears that will listen, because there's also another factor that I think people feel very tense about, and that's obviously with the issue of defence spending. I do not understand why we have issues of defence spending. For me, it's always been whatever the security services and the army and the armed forces need. I don't understand why we don't just give it to them. They are the people that keep us safe. They are the people that are there. They are to make sure that we get to live our lives as we do. And yet I'm reading here that John Healey, the new Chancellor, who was Defence Secretary, failed to secure the 3% defence spending when he took the Chancellor job. If I remember rightly, he rather wrote this great grandiose letter of resignation about how important defence spending seems to be. And yet now he's the guy controlling the public purse. We seem to be yet again hitting the same brick wall.
Yeah, the problem here is it's not just about 3%, it's about the urgency of increasing the defence budget, because improving our defence takes time and we need to take decisions now. I think we all admired Healey for resigning from the Starmer administration on this issue, but it's very worrying now that in the recent interview, the Prime Minister can't make a commitment on 3% of GDP until post 2035. That's too little, too late, and this country is in danger. And something needs to be done about it immediately. The first responsibility of the state is the security of its citizens, and this is an issue which really outweighs all others. And if you talk to national security professionals like myself, I can't emphasize how important it is. And we have a government which is evading the issue.
Yeah, I was going to say, when was the last government do you believe that actually did put that first? How far back do we actually have to go? Because I'm struggling, even in my lifetime, to think of one where defence spending and security was actually on the agenda and was taken very seriously.
Good question. I'm not sure. You've got to go a long way back. And I mean, the Conservative Party have been just as guilty in terms of, Cameron and Osborne. So this isn't so much a party failing. It's a national failing. I think if you go back to Thatcher, perhaps, I'm not sure what the levels of spending were during that period, but I think that they were significant. The cuts came with Cameron and others. And it was just massive neglect. And some of us have been shouting from the sidelines about this for years.
It just seemed to be, it was Dr. Liam Fox, wasn't it, when he was Defence Secretary, that really put in that review. And ever since that moment, we've gone on a downward trajectory when it comes to defence spending.
It's appalling. I mean, we're on an increase now, but the increase... The curve of the increase is not steep enough. We have to take this very seriously. We should be following the Polish example. Poland are rearming fast. We ought to be rearming fast.
Is that literally because of who's on the doorstep, if I'm being brutally honest, when it comes to Russia and the threat that actually poses?
If you have a border with Russia and you've got Russian missiles landing on your territory, okay, by accident. But on the other hand, you feel the draft very, very strongly indeed, and there's a huge problem in Central Europe.
Yeah, I was going to say, did we do an Air Force deal with the Polish not so long ago under Starmer? It seemed to have got all the headlines, and then I think people looked under the headline to read the actual article and went, well, that doesn't seem to amount to very much, if I remember correctly.
It looked like a good headline at the time. It's right that we should be developing a military relationship with the Poles. They are going to be the most, one of the most important defence powers in Europe. They're building up very fast. It's the right thing to do, but the substance of the agreement was shallow, let's say.
Well, it came from a shallow Prime Minister, so let's not overextend ourselves in thinking that, that guy actually wants to put the nation first, because I found the most laughable comment that he thought he should be head of NATO. I mean, Keir Starmer as head of NATO, I mean... No, just a solid no to that proposition, if you ask me. But I just wanted to ask Sir, because I remember reading just the other week, actually, that the migrant crisis here into the UK, we had reports that the Iranians were exploiting it. I have no doubt that the Russians have been exploiting it. We've had a red notice, if I've got that correctly, was read out in Parliament about activities by foreign states on UK soil. And yet... still seem to be hitting this wall of why we're not doing anything. I understand the money is, you know, they're in debates about it, but it seems to be the kind of obstacles to getting anything done aren't being moved out of the way either. I find that is equally concerning because, like you said, it takes time to develop all these the new procedures and new technologies and all this kind of stuff. Why are we making this even harder for ourselves? It's not just, like you say, it's not just the money, but the implementation period of this stuff seems to be very slow as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is, you know, it's not given a high enough priority. You've seen what Andy Burnham's apparent priorities are now, you know, delegation in local government and the care system, both very laudable and things that need to be changed. With that, I agree. But at the same time, he should be putting emphasis on these other issues and giving them maybe more airtime, more importance than things that are going to be solved over 10, 15, 20 years. Look, the state of Europe is fragile geopolitically. We are in a vulnerable position. This ought to be the topic that we're talking about primarily. And, you know, the other topics are important, but this has urgency in a way that other issues that are being pushed deliberately in the media are not quite so urgent because they're going to take a long time to solve.
Ah, right, OK. Again, Sir Richard, I really do wish you were still in charge, if I'm being brutally honest, because that's the most common sense, about 15, 20 minutes that I've heard on the issue of security and defence of the realm in a very long time. So thank you so much for joining us. It's been a great pleasure to chat with you today. Have a great the rest of the day. So we're going to move very kind of swiftly on after the break, where we're going to be talking to Andy Mayer about, who's an energy analyst at the Institute for Economic Affairs, about drill baby drill, North Sea oil. Will we make Trump happy? Is this actually possible, or is BP actually going to, you know, get out of the room and leg it? Stick around because you won't want to miss this one.
$49,000 people are leaving Morocco because apparently it's war-torn. But Jet2 this morning are offering 20% off a trip to Morocco for a week. Which country in Europe wipes everybody else's backside but its own people? Here.
This is a huge football story, folks. UEFA has now said no European nation will participate in any FIFA competition so long as proposals to create a company to run the World Cup remain alive.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to Talk. I'm Peter Barnes. I'm filling in for Alex Phillips. So, yeah, we're going to get straight into this. I would like, as I said just before the break, I'm delighted to be joined by Andy Mayer. We're going to be talking all things drill, baby drill, BP, North Sea oil, and whether any of this is actually going to happen. Because on Friday, after more than 60 years of operation, BP has said its plans to move its base of operations possibly out of the London Stock Exchange and move its headquarters out of the UK in general. Andy, can you explain all this to us? And a very good morning to you. I hope you're well.
Morning. So the Pacific announcement last week was that BP would be leaving the North Sea. So at the moment, it's not the case that the headquarters is under threat. But that speculation has been made because the North Sea is such an important part of their UK operations. So BP, for clarity, is a massive global company. It's about $85 billion of market capitalisation and one of the largest companies in the UK still. And what it's saying to the government is, despite all the warm vibes that are coming from Andy Burnham, the positive noises, the memes, the expression of pragmatism that he said.
The fact we're sending memes to $80 billion companies is just terrifying to me as a concept. I mean, it's different. Yeah. That's going to be my new way of phrasing it. It's new. Sorry, do continue, Andy.
So BP's reaction to those statements and those warm words is no, thank you. And that should worry us. I mean, to be clear, we have got a lot of oil left in the North Sea and a lot of gas as well. We've got a lot of the stuff onshore that the last government put a moratorium on. And this one has decided to continue that and also say the same will apply to new drilling in the North Sea if it's not connected to an existing field. Well, BP manage some of those existing fields and they're not interested.
Yeah,
So
I find that fascinating as well. Just something that you just said then, that, you know, we still have a lot of oil and gas. Now, the argument is often made that there isn't enough there to warrant this level of investment. That's one of the, the Green zealots, Ed Miliband, running around saying stuff that I try not to listen to because it makes me upset. But yeah, where do we stand on this? Because in my head, I'm going to trust that the people who could make a lot of money are going to say, yes, let's drill here because we're going to make a lot of money, not Ed Miliband, who doesn't understand how money is made.
Yeah, so this is a cold commercial decision, and the chief executive of BP acts in the interests of her shareholders, not on the basis of what impact it's going to have on UK GDP. That's Andy Burnham's job. And the market reaction to that is that BP's share price has risen. They agree with the decision, it would seem.
That's terrifying.
Right. No. The decisions that Ed Miliband made when he was Energy Secretary were very much rooted in wanting to signal to the rest of the world that we would lead by example. So he wants companies like BP to lead because it then says that we are the most serious company on net zero. The trouble is that that's obviously had a very bad impact on energy prices at home. So we're now just importing things that we would have developed ourselves, like oil and gas. And that's more expensive and has a higher impact on the environment through higher emissions.
Yeah, I've always found that funny that we import something, we burn it. Do we send a memo with the kind of emissions that, this one came from Britain or that one came from Norway? How do just the logic of this kind of, well, we've imported it, so it's therefore green and therefore it's all perfectly fine, makes absolutely no sense to me at all. But yeah, you're so right about the issue of energy prices. My fear on this one, and again, you please feel free to correct me, this is your area much more than it is on mine. Will this signal to other major companies who do this industry that if BP don't have confidence in the UK, a lot of other companies shouldn't have confidence in us either?
Well, some of those companies have already been leaving for the last 5 years. So it's been a long time since BP was the biggest player in the North Sea. But the super majors who have, to be clear, lots of options around the world, have been replaced by smaller independent companies. But those companies are starting to look abroad as well. So the entire basin is in decline. They're losing about 1,000 jobs a month. Wow. And BP's 1,100 staff clearly are going to be very worried today, but hopefully somebody will buy the business and try and keep as many as possible.
How likely is that, though? If, we're doing politics by vibes and memes, it doesn't exactly scream confidence in a sector with this amount of money on the table. How likely is a buyer going to be?
I mean, you would have to be extremely optimistic to think that somebody's going to come in to rescue this business, but it's possible. But this is something the government can change. So rather than giving expressions of sympathy and pragmatism, let's have some decisions. Let's see the super tax on the North Sea cut. Let's see the regulation be cut down to size so they're more in line with other places. Let's see them bring in a regime that gives people confidence that if they invest in the North Sea now, those investments will be protected in the same way the government's done over many years for the renewables industry. So a bit
That's a very good point, actually. We roll out the red carpet for wind and, all the rest of that stuff, yet the thing that we actually need to make money and all the rest of it, we make it very difficult, and we make it very culturally difficult, and so we kind of distance ourselves from that. And I think that's got to change just as much as the policy stuff, because I think you're right. The number of things that they could just remove and actually make this place attractive to businesses is very simple. It's not a kind of complex thing to do. Even I can understand it. So I don't understand what the obstacle is. Is it literally just this belief that if we do it, then when it comes to the net zero stuff, other countries are just going to naturally follow because we're British and that's what happens? Is this literally what they believe? Because I don't think many other countries are opting for economic suicide.
No, I mean, it's certainly what they believe, but the problem with pretending that you're leading the world is that you've got to prove it by people following you. And the way we used to do this, the way we actually led the world, was by having great industries that other people wanted, and then they copied us and they bought our stuff. It's not by sending Ed Miliband to an international conference where he says nice, warm things about redistribution and colonial justice and tackling climate change, which is something he has no control over whatsoever. And that's where we are. So what we could do is attract that investment, attract innovative companies into the basin to try different things to extract what is there, and then use those resources to invest then in the future technologies. So it should be an anti-renewables or an anti-nuclear position. It should be just about promoting fossil fuels. It should be about linking one problem to its own solution. And we have the means to do that, but we just haven't done it.
Yeah, that seems to be the common denominator in a lot of things in this nation. That we keep forgetting that a lot of things are linked together. And if you could affect one area of change in an area that you may not even think is actually connected to it. But, if we actually had this thing called joined-up government and people picked up the phone and talked to each other, who knows? We actually might be able to, drill, baby, drill, because I actually think a lot of this kind of posturing from Andy Burnham is to kind of make the White House back down a little bit, because I always get the feeling that it's breathing very heavily down the British government's neck. And it keeps pushing, and you know what Donald Trump is like. He doesn't mind insulting you to your face. He's a New Yorker in that way. Do you think that is playing a big factor in a lot of how the shift on tone, shall we say, the memes have changed, shall we say, for this government over Starmer?
Well, Burnham's got to be careful. I mean, Donald Trump liked Keir Starmer because he saw him as rather like some of the lawyers he used to use to protect him from his various interesting business ventures. I'm not sure what he's going to make of Andy. And his cheeky, chappy charm. I mean, he's either going to take him seriously because he's doing things that Trump recognises is good, such as encouraging industry to invest in the UK, or he's going to treat him as a bit of a joke because he's wandering around the place talking about feelings.
That's true. I don't think he knows who the Smiths are. He wasn't quite sure where Manchester was. I think he called it just a small town, if I'm being honest. And as a guy from that neck of the woods, I did think that was a little bit too far, even for my love of the Trump. But I will say, when you say that these companies are leaving, where are they going? Who's kind of nicking our stuff? Who's being like the one dangling the sweets and saying, "Come on over here"? Which kind of areas and like nations are kind of saying, if you don't want to set up there, come over here?
Well, BP, for example, has the Gulf of Mexico. It has Iraq, which has a more stable fiscal regime. The United Kingdom.
Well, there's a sentence.
And it has a number of other opportunities that obviously they'll be keeping under wraps and internal. Canada and the United States are great markets. Qatar is a great place to invest if you can. Parts of the Middle East are looking at pipelines to relieve the problem they've currently got with the Strait of Hormuz, and so it goes on. I mean, there are hundreds of opportunities out there.
Oh, wonderful! We're playing hard to get in a field of competitors. I think that's definitely the dumbest approach to this I think I've ever heard. And though saying that, the idea that we could just not drill and not do any of this stuff, and we just let it sit there. And I don't really understand how this kind of fell so far, and what seems to be very fast. I remember we brought in a windfall tax over energy not so long ago because we didn't like the idea of energy companies making profit, which I didn't understand that either. But where did the kind of the collapse of BP into kind of moving out of the UK really start? Because I doubt it was just recently. I think this might have been a long-term trajectory.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, you have to go back to the 2000s and the build-up to the Climate Change Act. And there you see a change in narrative, which essentially treats oil and gas as a potential source of money that can then provide solutions in future. So beyond petroleum was BP's branding at the time. And that was under John Brown. He was very keen that the company demonstrated how it could be part of the solution. And a lot of that's still happening. I mean, they have a big EV network, for example. They do invest in wind. I'm not sure about solar. I think they were getting out of that when I was still there. But they are a really interesting company. And most of the big energy companies want to diversify their portfolios and be a part of future energy as well as the current regime.
Oh, right. Anyway, I was going to say that kind of filled me with a little bit of hope, and then he took it all away in one fell swoop. But anyway, Andy, thanks so much for explaining all of that to us. It is a great and interesting topic, but stick around after the break, because I'm about to fanboy like you've never seen. I'm going to be sitting down with Sir John Curtis, and we're going to be talking all things polls and Manchester and the mayoral election. So do stick around after the break. This is going to be fun.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to Talk. I'm Peter Barnes, filling in for Alex Phillips. And as I said just before the break, you're about to watch the fanboy moment of the century, because I've always wanted to sit down and talk with Sir John Curtis about polling. And it just so happens that we had the Greater Manchester mayoral election yesterday, and there is a lot to go at in these polls. Good morning, John. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you. Good morning to Peter. You're far too kind.
Oh, trust me, I am not. I'm holding it together like you've never seen, but on this side of the screen, put it that way. I've been an admirer of yours for a very, very long time, but I want to get straight into it because I know we're on a little bit of a time slot. So we're looking at these results. Obviously, the Labour Party are claiming this was a big success. I'm looking at a very low turnout. I'm looking at people saying this was a rejection of devolution. A lot of narratives seem to come out of this result, and yet a lot of people didn't seem to vote in it. Could you give us just a quick rundown of what we should be looking at, what's actually of interest, and what's not really being talked about that we should be looking at?
Well, I think I'd pick out two things. I think the first is that sometimes one has to give credit where credit is due. The Labour Party got 47% of the vote. Now, if you bear in mind, it only got 24% of the vote in Manchester in the local elections at the beginning of May. That is one indicator that this is a very, very different result than it might have been a few weeks ago under Keir Starmer's leadership. And also, indeed, even actually the 47% vote is about 4 points up on what Labour got in the general election in Manchester in 2024. And yes, it's not as good as Andy Burnham did when he was the candidate for the Mayor of London, but the Mayor of Manchester, but we know he's got a substantial personal popularity. I think the truth is the result, if anything, was very much at the high end of expectations for Labour, even in the wake of the Burnham bounce. The second thing we should note, well, Reform at 21%. It's only 3 or 4 points up on the general election tally in Manchester. We would have expected much more than that. It's down, and it's 9 points down on what they got in the local elections. And I think what some people will then also point out, and who got 9%? Rupert Lowe's Restore Britain.
Yes.
which is an even better score than it achieved in the Makerfield by-election. And, you know, Reform have their problems over the media coverage of various aspects of both the party's finances and Nigel Farage's personal financial support. But Rupert Lowe is demonstrating it's seemingly an ability also to make Reform's life potentially rather more difficult. So in a sense, therefore, the broad evidence, the opinion polls, Reform not as high as they once were, and two, Labour enjoying something about certainly plenty of evidence to support that narrative in the result of Thursday's by-election.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not just the Reform that Rupert Lowe is making their life a little bit difficult. If memory serves, the Restore actually managed to leapfrog over the Conservatives.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, when was the one thing I really did want to ask, and you'll be hopefully the best person to explain this, did the Conservatives really compete in this election? Because I look at the Makerfield one, they put up a candidate, they did a bit of leafleting. It's always, it seems to me in this particular election, we had a very low turnout, but I don't think the parties really put their whole kind of machine behind it. And I think all parties rather did that. I don't know whether it's a money constraint and, you know, resources. We've had a lot of big elections and a lot of unprecedented events happening all at once. But also, is voter fatigue playing a factor, particularly in Greater Manchester? We had Gorton and Denton, then we had Makerfield, then we've had Andy Burnham and all this kind of change. Are people kind of taking a little bit of a break from politics?
Well, there's the two propositions there. One is, you know, the low turnout, and two, what might be the implications for party support. So let's unpack those. So on the former, yeah, it's a 20-25% turnout. But look, mayoral elections don't attract particularly high turnout at the best of times. The best it's been around 33% in Greater Manchester. The first one, if I remember rightly, was around 27-28%. By-elections in general tend to get lower support than you get in a general election. So I think we shouldn't be surprised about the 25%. That said, I think it's, you know, the Conservatives came fourth in this area in the local elections. The Democrats even worse. It's therefore perhaps not surprising that neither party put a great deal of effort into these local elections. And it may be, and I emphasize may, it may be that one of the reasons why in the end Labour got 47% was, of course, yes, they were trying hard. They were. Very, very keen to do as well as possible in this by-election, whereas some of their opponents, particularly their more traditional opponents, Conservative and Liberal Democrats, perhaps were not able to do so. Equally, the Greens will argue that because the students weren't at uni at the end of July, many of them, therefore one of their core constituencies was also not around, and that's maybe why they didn't do so well. So yes, I think there are potential considerations that says Labour tried hard, and that helped them to do well. Some of the other parties perhaps didn't try so hard, and that perhaps helps to explain why they fell back. And that, therefore, is one reason. Certainly, the Manchester by-election result should be noted, but we shouldn't necessarily get too excited about it.
Yeah, I always love that. You know, I always like to tell people, if you see a poll you like, pick the one you don't like, and that's probably the one you should operate off. That's always been my rule in politics. If you like the result of a poll, don't trust it, or, you know, find the one that proves the opposite and go off that one. I think that's always a solid rule, and I think that's a good rule of thumb. But when it actually comes to the turnout itself, it's being used to talk about how people don't like devolution. It's being used to kind of argue that voters have actively turned away from that. Is there any amount of evidence whatsoever that we know of so far that lends any credibility to that? Because my timeline on X was literally all of that last night.
To be frank, no. I mean, there hasn't been a great deal of polling about devolution in England because there's not been that much of interest. Now, it's a long time since we've covered this on British Social Attitudes, but when British Social Attitudes was covering the so far as having directly elected mayors are concerned, that wasn't particularly popular. And of course, once upon a time, before you had a directly elected mayor, the voters were consulted in a referendum, and both Conservative and Labour administrations discovered that often the proposition was being rejected. So you now get a mayor without a referendum. More broadly on devolution, well, the truth is the public have been pretty evenly split for a long time between those who say basically England should be run from Westminster and those who either think there should be an English Parliament or some form of regional devolution. But certainly the one attempt that was made to put regional devolution to the voters, which of course was up in the northeast back in 2004, it was rejected, but that is now a long time ago. And I think we should bear in mind also that quite a lot of the mayoral authorities, they're actually just putting back together the old metropolitan counties of Greater Manchester and Merseyside, etc. And I think most people would say, at an operational level at least, that was something of a mistake. And to that extent, at least, was putting back into the framework of local government something that was previously there.
That's quite interesting, actually, because I wonder if this lends into Andy Burnham's obsession with this number 10 North and his idea of moving power out of London. Now, I don't really dislike the idea. I think you have to do more than office furniture, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
You actually have to move power and economic power. And we do seem to be that the new mayor has a significant increase in power. I was going to say, is this realistically going to fundamentally change how these areas are run? And what do we think political parties are going to say about that? Because a lot of parties are now saying that we want to scrap these roles, but I suggest that if they get into power, they might rather like to keep the power.
Yes, one of the questions that Labour have been asked is how will you feel about it if Reform wins some of these mayoralties? They said, actually, we're fine with that, but we will wait and see. I mean, I think the truth is that the devolution that Andy Burnham has in mind is nothing like as dramatic as the devolution that's already taken place in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. And that sometimes gets left out of the debate. England, of course, has never had that much devolution. The argument, as I understand it about this, I mean, the truth is that the announcement that we had on Friday was basically saying, actually, regional mayors are not going to get any more money they have at the moment. It's just that rather than getting an annual grant, they will get a regular flow of money based on the taxation raised in their area. And the argument that flows from that is that means that those regional mayors will be able to borrow on the bond markets to be able to fund infrastructure, because they will now have a regular flow of income, which they can then persuade bondholders that gives them a security, and that building of the infrastructure will enable us to get greater economic growth. It's not the first time I've heard that argument. It's a very long-standing argument. The proof of the pudding will be in the eating. But I think certainly to suggest that it's a dramatic change in the distribution of power, that I think is still debatable. And I think one of the other interesting things about number 10 North is, will it actually begin to constitute an office of the Prime Minister and actually strengthen the Prime Minister within the Whitehall machine? Again, that will be interesting to watch.
Yeah, that last point I could not agree more, because a lot of people keep thinking it's some kind of show pony. I was like, if this thing has actual power, I mean, there is a real fundamental shift, realistically, in the power into one individual. And I think that is something that a lot of people have rather overlooked, because, you know, we don't like Andy Burnham, apparently, and because he likes the Smiths and he wears a T-shirt and a blazer, which I've happened to don today, because I thought I could understand him if I wore the same clothes as him. But, Sir John, I know you have to run because you're an incredibly busy individual. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us. This has been somewhat of a dream, so thank you very much for that. But ladies and gentlemen, just after the break, do stick with us, because I want to hear what you've got to say. We've got to through your calls, texts, WhatsApp, all your messages, and this next section is all over to you. So stick with us. I'm Peter Barnes. This is Talk.
49,000 people are leaving Morocco because apparently it's war-torn. But Jet2 this morning are offering 20% off a trip to Morocco for a week. Which country in Europe wipes everybody else's backside but its own people? Here.
This is a huge football story, folks. UEFA has now said no European nation will participate in any FIFA competition so long as proposals to create a company to run the World Cup remain alive.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. Welcome back to Talk. I'm Peter Barnes. This is now your section. We're going to go through your messages, calls, texts and WhatsApps and all of this stuff. I've got an absolute litany to get through. Thank you so much for all the nice comments, by the way. And, yeah, I want to dive straight into this because some of these are very, very good. There's a great one here from Samantha. She says, Peter, if over 60,000 crossed the border on Thursday and Spain have sent back over 33,000 in a day, why cannot we send 33,000 back in a day as well? Surely the ECHR is the same for Spain as it is for us. I think that is a very good point, because what this actually shows is that with political will, a government can do something. A government is able to actually do something. Yes, it works within the confines of the law, but if it chooses to deport, it can do. And yet, I do find one factor very interesting in this, because I love how the French discovered that they have a military again, because if I remember rightly, we gave them quite a lot of money at one point, and we continue to do it because it's the definition of insanity. And their response, when confronted by Chris Phillips, the Shadow Home Secretary, as to why they're still allowing, this is the French, the small boats to cross, he says, well, we tell them not to do it. I'm not going to do the accent, I sound very hello, but we tell them not to do it. I mean, does nobody in the French army own a Stanley knife? Because I think that's all it takes to pop a dinghy. This is such a good point, Samantha, and thank you so much for your text. What else have we got here? Just a quick one. Let's look at... this is a good one from Jason in Keswick. The immigration crisis is being facilitated by our government with the handouts, and Burnham doesn't have the spine to address it. He has the majority to force anything through, but he won't do it. Won't do what we need, and it's being done, though it will win him the next election. Absolutely spot on. Every government, Keir Starmer and Andy Burnham, have a whopping great big majority. They could stop all of the handouts. They could stop the hotels. They could actually end this if they choose to. They are choosing not to. Government and governing is about choices. The choices they are making are their own, and it is the rest of us that are paying the price. And I want to jump straight to a call now. Who have we got? Is it Mandy? Hi, Mandy. Welcome to Talk. I'm Peter. How's it going?
Hi, Peter.
How's it going? What do you want to talk about?
I wanted just to talk about. Do you know when all this thing was going on over in? Is it Ceuta?
Oh, do not ask me to pronounce this. My favourite thing is every single presenter on Talk has had a different way of saying it. I'm going with Ceuta, but I reliably there will be a hate crime incident, coming my way. I have absolutely no doubt about it.
Well, I'm calling it Ceuta. And I thought I'll just pop on to X and have a look and see what the Messiah without a mandate is saying. And he was talking about bread rolls.
Oh, yes, I saw this where he's on about, is it a bomb cake? Is it a bread roll? Is it yes. Now, that is a debate that you have when you go to university, or when a northerner meets a southerner and we don't want to talk about the weather. That's the conversation. That is not the conversation we should be having from the Prime Minister when this is happening. I could not agree more with you on this. I thought that was shameful.
It was unbelievable, and I thought, is this man serious? Because I don't think he's like a, I don't know, like you say, a local mayor or a local councillor. He's not Prime Minister material. He really isn't. He's not a serious person.
I think that's such a good and very observant point. He's not a serious individual. He wanted to be a DJ, and it speaks in Smith's lyrics. I like the Smiths, not that much. I mean, he's supposed to be tackling some of the biggest issues we've faced as a nation since, before I was born. And therefore, this is what we need. We need statesmen. We need big politicians with vision and drive and political will. And he's not doing it. And yet again, as I just said, it is about the choice not to do it. That's what really strikes me. He's choosing not to talk about this, and he's doing it because of politics.
He's running away, and I think he just carries a big bucket of sand around with him, and every so often he just sticks his head in it.
Oh, yeah. Unfortunately, I just feel sorry for the sand at that point, if I'm being brutally honest, Mandy. Thank you so much for calling in. Have a great the rest of the day. I want to jump now and speak to Grace in Ealing. Good morning, Grace. How are we doing?
I'm very blessed, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing all right. The network is still standing, and I'm not sweating as much as I was before, so we'll take that as a win. How are you doing? What would you like to talk about?
Well, I'm not as anti Burnham as some people, but I think that he's not the Messiah, and I think that we've got that word in our language because of someone who did far more miraculous things about 2,000 years ago. But I think that with regard to puberty blockers. I hated my body when I was a teenager. I still do. And I developed an eating disorder that's completely messed up my life. And I had adults around me telling me not to hate my body and not to seek to change my body. And I think that the idea that you would have adults telling children, I mean, you might say that they're teenagers rather than children, but they're still children when they're teenagers.
In the eyes of the law, they are still children, yes.
Yeah, to tell them that they are born in the wrong body, effectively, although they wouldn't use that wording, is just completely, disastrous and tragic, and is only going to lead to really tragic long-term consequences. And I ended up with osteoporosis because of my eating disorder, and I think through the same biology of stopping how many hormones you have when you're going through puberty, these young people will also end up with long-term damage to their bones, and so it's really worrying.
I could not agree more with you, and I in a way, I try to find some sympathy for the parents. This is an area I bet most parents are not equipped to deal with and did not expect to have to deal with. But at some point, a parent is a parent, and they kind of have to say, no. I know we don't do that anymore, and people get very tense when you say the word no to children, because that's what they are, children. What I do think is we should be flooding the therapy side of things with a lot more money than we are, and I do think we should have a lot more sympathy in this debate, because it is not a simple kind of, they're just being told all this stuff, or they're being indoctrinated online. I think we use these kind of big catch-all things to make us feel better and to also avoid a very complex conversation. For some reason, we don't like complex. We used to run towards complex things, now we run away from them, and I think kids are paying the price for that when it comes to social media and all of this stuff. But I don't know if you caught the interview I did with Helen Joyce earlier, where she talked about how the kind of the pro-trans people always say that puberty blockers are the kind of their big rallying thing. It's their bit. They're not going to let this go. You know, this, from what she was arguing, that this trial doesn't seem necessary. It doesn't seem to give us anything, yet they've chosen to do it anyway. I go back to that word, chosen to do it. And yes, the parents play a factor in this, but there's other people and other factors that have what I think is a much more nefarious agenda, if I'm being honest. I don't know about you, Grace, but I get uneasy with this conversation.
I can't help but wonder about the reality that if a young person is put on certain medications, they're likely to end up on similar medications for life. You're going to need for life to be blocking your natural hormones, and that's going to make someone a lot of money. And I'm not normally a conspiracy theorist, but it seems like someone somewhere is thinking of young people as a way to make money long term. I don't think that's what all people who are pro-trans are thinking. I think that some of them might genuinely think that it's a moral good. In their own way, they might think that mistakenly. But I think that, I do wonder about someone somewhere who might be thinking about how they can profit off of young people's distress.
I could not agree more. And again, I try to avoid the tinfoil hat. I know a lot of people that spend a lot of money on tinfoil. It must cost a fortune. But again, I find it interesting that this debate has not gone away. That the issue of trans children has somehow continued to stay in the top bit of the political discourse, and I don't believe that is an accident. I think there's a lot of money sloshing around with people wanting to push this stuff. Now, whether it's to make money or whether it's because they believe it's the right thing to do, I we'll leave other people to investigate all that kind of stuff. But again, at the end of the day, this is children, and we have a problem with protecting children in the UK. And we have for a very, very long time, long before the grooming gangs, long before any of that stuff. We somehow look at the most vulnerable people in our society and go, there's somebody else's problem. I always think that as a society, we've let down children. Everybody has let down children by saying, oh, well, somebody else has got that, that's somebody else's responsibility. And kids, not to, you know, mangle the lyric, but they are the future. And I do think that we should be a lot more open to the idea that we actually learn to be parents and look after them. But anyway, Grace, thank you so much for calling in. It was such a kind of delicate issue, and I think you argued that beautifully, if I'm being brutally honest. I want to switch now to Barry in Norwich. Good morning, Barry. How are we doing today? How's the lovely Norwich?
Oh, Norwich is lovely, sunny, bright, yeah, warm.
Great. Yeah, so London is here as well. I was going to say London's like that as well. Oh, sorry. I'm going to say, well, is it the immigration crisis? Is it literally pick an issue?
Sorry, yeah, immigration crisis.
There we go.
Yeah, sorry, my head's gone. It's the heat.
No, tell me about it.
Yeah. On the immigration question, you were talking to that guest earlier on, right? And I want to know who sanctions this, right? Who actually makes these decisions that these people can come over and stay in hotels and get benefits and, you know, basically just rip this country off with money. They're not coming across because they're fleeing war. I'm sorry, they're not. Not every single one of them is coming across because they're fleeing war. They're coming across because they get the land of milk and honey here, yeah?
Yes, I could not agree more. The mayor of Calais was very famous not so long ago for pulling her hair out at the British. Literally, I think apparently she did it at a meeting when we refused to cut the $5 billion from the welfare budget, because she literally said, you are rolling out the red carpet and you are importing this problem and causing a problem in other countries because of it. We're not being a particularly good neighbour. We complain about the French not doing it. We don't help ourselves. Like I said, when literally we have people ripping the country off, and it is taxpayers, people who get up and go to work, and they are literally being fleeced for everything. And more importantly, the minute me and you start to say something like this, we're far right, we're the problem, we're the ones that have to be stopped, I find that even more concerning.
No, I carry on speaking. I don't care. If people get offended by it, then tough. Yeah, I'm worried about the borders. I'm worried about people coming in undocumented. We don't know nothing about them, where they come from, who they are, what they've done, what they're going to do. You know, and they're just left to wander around the country, claim benefits, work on bikes, you know, get free driving lessons and everything else, while the British people are left to, you know, work, struggle. You know, and I just want to know who actually sanctions this in Parliament. Who said, yeah, it's all right for these people to come across, we'll put them up in hotels, we'll put them up in HMOs, we'll give them this, we'll give them that. Who actually made that decision? Because that person who made that decision, that's perjury, slightly, in my, do you know what I mean? Yeah, you put in the safety of, you know, a government's main job is to look after its citizens, have secure borders, a strong military and a strong police force.
Yeah, it's known as the first duty of government is the protection of its citizens and its borders and its territorial area. It is literally, if you don't have that, then the other bits inside it are irrelevant. If you don't protect the border, the people that actually made that decision, it all stems from Acts of Parliament, which is passed by successive governments, Conservative ones and Labour ones, and some of those people hot skipped and jumped into Reform UK. I know they don't like to talk about that bit, but those people also hold a little bit of responsibility as well. I don't like to play party politics on this one anymore, if I'm being honest, purely because we have to fix this. We have to stop the name calling. We have to stop trying to put everybody on trial. And for once, stop people coming. And the only way we will do that, in my opinion, and I've been around the Westminster scene far too long, this is why I'm 35 and look like this, I tell you now, is actually people putting down their weapons and pointing them, maybe, in the direction that they need to be. In other words, all work together. Why can we not work together to actually put people first? The people that are here already. Because you don't help people coming in if our own nation has collapsed. If people are at each other's throats, they're scared about whether they can turn the heating on in winter. They're scared about how they're going to get to work, how they're going to pay the bills, how they're going to pay for the car. If the kid suddenly needs, you know, braces, it could cripple a family. A broken washing machine is proven to be one of the biggest factors of a household losing its disposable income. I mean, was the 7th largest economy in the world. It's hilarious. It's terrifying to me. But honestly, Barry, keep up the good fight. Keep talking and don't let them shut you up, because they will try. Trust me on that one. But yeah, again, I just want to read a couple of the messages out now, and then we will be flicking to the news at 12 o'clock. But a great one here from Sarah. The whole devolution thing, this is to do with Downing Street North. But yeah, I will get back to that one actually just before the news. Do stick with us. After that, I'm Peter Barnes. This is Talk. Stick.
The Home Secretary has brought forward a very rigorous plan in relation to this, and let's remember, of course, the numbers can fluctuate, but overall boat crossings are down quite significantly year on year, so that does suggest that the plan is working.
We've just witnessed drone footage of the French authorities handing out life jackets to illegal immigrants and then waving them goodbye as they head on their way towards the UK. So the French are actively helping and facilitating illegal immigration. In addition to that, the French forces did nothing to stop that huge migrant dinghy. In fact, the dinghy came out, then it went back to the beach to pick up even more illegal immigrants and then departed for a second time. During all of that, the French did nothing, and they even handed out life jackets and waved goodbye as these illegal immigrants head towards the UK. I think that's terrible. I mean that anyone who did cross the channel and arrive in Dover could be immediately deported within around about a week.
Give that a second, he's just dragging a line by the look of it.
Is that a warning shot towards us? I don't know.
Well, I was trying to work out.
Okay. The French officers could clearly see we were conducting an interview on the back of the fishing boat. They sailed extremely close to us and started firing gunshots, 11 live rounds. We could see the bullets hitting the water behind our boat. They weren't firing before their approach. They weren't firing afterwards. There was no notification of any kind of training exercise. So it did seem to me to be an effort to intimidate us.
The thing that I find, and I should say alarm clock Brits find so frustrating, Chris, and this is why I wanted you on this morning. Yesterday, finally, the unelected Messiah of Manchester stood up and said to consummate fury from most of us that Labour's plan to stop dinghy migrants is working. This, Chris, despite the fact that 1,000 illegal migrants have still come into this country in the last 9 days since he became Prime Minister.
Je suis un député dans le Parlement du Royaume-Uni. Why have you allowed the migrants into the water? Why haven't you stopped them?
Pourquoi on les stoppe pas? Pourquoi on les stoppe pas? Our order is to let them go like that.
Your order is to let them go?
We just have to say to them, don't do that, it's dangerous.
So your orders are not to intervene?
We have to...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, everybody. How are we all doing? Actually, no, good afternoon. Is his mid-morning. I keep forgetting that, you know, when it goes 12 o'clock, it's afternoon. I hope you are all well. For those who are a little shocked to see me, I'm not Alex Phillips, though I don't have the hips for it, if I'm being honest. But no, she has not turned into a northern bloke. I am Peter Barnes. I'm filling in while she's stuck at home because of the trains. But we're going through all the big stories of today. My show question, and what I want to hear from you from, is will the Ceuta migrant invasion, which has happened just a few days ago, where 60,000 people invaded into Spain, and the Spanish went, OK, they have now returned, a vast majority of them, but is this a turning point? Is this the moment Europe, in the words of Nigel Farage, wakes up? Is the open door policy over? Is this a kind of seminal moment, the one where we'll look back on in a few years and go, that's when it all changed. That's when Europe woke up. That's when the Maloney's, that's when, you know, the actual leaders, the leaders of Europe actually decided to put the people of Europe first, actually decided to put our border security first. I'm not saying Britain is included in this, because we've got an emoji as a Prime Minister who likes the Smiths and wanted to be a DJ. So let's keep our expectations nice and low, because that's where they need to be. Because, you know, if he ties his shoelaces, it is a win. But yes, there is one individual in the world who I am hoping, yes, I'm sorry, just making sure someone in the gallery, they're nodding at me profusely, it's fine. And yes, so there's one individual in the world who actually took the issue of illegal immigration very, very seriously. and he decided to do something about it, and he did it very swiftly and very effectively. Let's roll clip and see who that is.
We have the safest border in the world. If we're not in office, our country will be invaded at levels that made Spain look small time. And when I watched it, I said, boy, I'm going to say it because I knew you were going to be at Camp David, and I say, that's going to be a talking point for the midterms. Because when you look at what happened to Spain, they don't know what to do. And it's happening again today. They're coming in by the tens of thousands. They're just invading the country. And what that is weak law, bad management, but very liberal law.
Yes, so that was Donald Trump, the Don, the man who actually decided to take this issue seriously and do something about it, and I think he's perfectly right. It is weak law, it is bad management, and it is namby-pamby liberalism, I'm afraid. And there's one man who's going to tell us how Britain can adopt this, and that's the great Steve Gill, former White House official, friend of the show. He served under Bush and the Clinton administrations. Hello, Steve, how are you doing? I'm afraid you're stuck with me. Alex isn't here.
It's great to be with you, and you're not sitting over on the side as usual, so we actually get to interact a little bit better.
I know, they've let me on this side of the desk. It is their own fault. That's all I'm saying. How are you doing? You all right?
Yeah, I'm doing good. And, one of the problems I think that President Trump is going to have, when we look at 2 years ago when he got elected, immigration was a top priority. But he's been too successful in locking down the border, stopping the flood of illegals coming in. Now the challenge is, how do you do what Spain is claiming they've done, where these 60,000 or so that came in, most of them have gone back. Is anybody really believing that, Peter?
No.
That, they came over, then they rushed out as quickly as they came in. So President Trump is now seeing that illegal immigration in the States is now like 4th or 5th on the list of primary concerns of people. Not at the top of the list, even though the 20 million or so who came here, who are driving illegally on our roads, causing car accidents, driving up our car insurance costs, using health care, taking jobs, driving up our rent costs and housing costs. All of the problems of illegal immigration continue because that same namby-pamby approach that the Democrats have approached and that your labor agreement or your labor leadership have is still a problem. And I like your thought that maybe this will be a wake-up call in Europe. But I have the fear that what it'll be a brief wake-up call, and then people are going to reach over, hit the snooze button, and you'll be right where we were at the beginning.
I couldn't agree more. And I have to admit, every time I've read that out, I keep thinking someone's going to make the snooze button analogy. And I've been wondering who the rest of the show is actually going to make it. I thought I would have to do it by the end of the show. But no, I think you're so right here, because my big fear is this is going to be considered a blip. It's going to be considered, just a one-off freak event that, they'll all they'll quiet down in the media, they'll reach out, use the levers of power to make sure that this isn't reported on, and, they'll drum something else up that we all have to get wound up about, probably somebody with pronouns and a lanyard, I imagine. But what was it that Trump was able to do that realistically meant he controlled that issue, and he was able to do the impossible, it seems, over here, and actually defend a border? Well, I've got to say, we were in the White House under two very different administrations, let's put it that way, and yet, the power of the presidency is obviously very different to the Prime Minister. But what is it about Trump that when he sees an issue, he does something? We find that very rare. A very kind of, oh no, we can't do that over here. What is it in Trump that when he sees something, he's got to fix it?
I think part of it, though, is that he was able to accomplish more in this, term in office than he was the first time. And a lot of that, Peter, is because the people he has surrounded himself this time versus the first time are ones that are all rowing their canoes in the same direction. The first time he was trying to, cater to the Republicans in name only, the moderate Republicans, the establishment in Washington, who might talk a game, but they weren't actually willing to implement his views, his policies. This time he brought people in, not just at the cabinet level, but that second, third tier down. And I know you and Alex and others that are involved with the show, you've worked in government, you've been involved. It's not just what the guy at the top says, it's does he put people in place who are actually going to get the job done that is his vision, her vision. And Trump has done that more. And I think with the illegal immigration issue, he was more committed to it, but then brought people who were committed to making sure the policies were implemented. The other thing I think that helped, get it done here, and maybe there is some help with what we've seen in Spain, the visuals. When people could see on their TV, you know, these folks, you know, gathering at the border, military-age males for the most part, the same thing we're seeing in Spain. That visual, people know what they see more than they know what they hear or read. So that visual, I think, helped make it work here. And perhaps the vision of what's happened in Spain will motivate people in Europe to recognize what they see is what's going to happen in their country next if they don't do something about it.
From your mouth to God's ears, I really do hope so, because my big fear is this is just going to be all kind of whitewashed over. I could see it happening, because the thing is, like I said, I've been in government. I know exactly how they're going to do it. That's the more depressing thing about when you see this stuff happen. You're like, I know the playbook because, one, I may have helped write it, and also I've helped implement it. It's rather irritating at times, but I'm just broadening this out because obviously, Steve, we have you on always for your big brain when it comes to international affairs. And obviously, we've got this big deal between Israel and Hamas and the board of peace that Trump set up, and everybody got very angry about it for some reason. It's called a board of peace. Why wouldn't people like this thing? But obviously, orange man bad syndrome. That's what I like to call it. Anything that man says, terrible idea. You know, he could say the sky is blue and this people would have to disagree with him. But I'm looking at this thing and it seems to me not that good of an idea, I have to admit. Why? Do you want to walk us through exactly kind of what's happening here? Because apparently Hamas is in a disarmament deal, but Israel's not going to like it, and it seems to be right around election time, and this seems to be somewhat of a crunch issue. I'm going to say, Steve, can you walk us through it?
Yeah, and I think the problem is that Trump is a deal maker. I've spent a lot of my career involved in doing deals, negotiating deals, and you know, writing the terms of the deal. And I've told clients, you know, for a long time, you know, I might be a pretty good lawyer, but lawyers can't write the terms of a deal that help you if you're dealing with someone you cannot trust. If you wouldn't do a deal with somebody on a handshake, and you do need to put it in writing, but if you wouldn't do a deal with somebody on a handshake, you don't trust them enough to do that. I can't draft an agreement good enough to protect you from people who are going to lie and cheat and steal from you. And I think that's the problem, whether it's Hamas, whether it's Iran, whether it's the Houthis, whether it's, you know, any of these other terror proxies of Iran. Can you trust that they're going to do what they promised to do? And if you wouldn't on a handshake, can you put the terms in writing that are going to work? And I think that when you look at what President Trump is saying, oh, it's a great deal. You know, we have an agreement. You know, Hamas and these terrorist, you know, organizations are going to do what they say. It is exactly the same challenge in Iran, where whoever he's talking to may not be able to implement the terms of the deal. So, yeah, oh, yeah, these guys are easy to get along with. I agree with them. But can they implement it? Same way with Iran. You're talking to one group, but the IRGC, the besieged police forces, they're not going to go along with it. So Hamas leadership, looking for a respite so they can rearm and find resources, because Iran's not got the money, the cash, and the weapons right now to share. You know, they're playing for time. And I think Trump wants to believe, but I think Israel, you know, because they're actually under the gun from these groups, they're going to be a little bit more, you know, reluctant and more skeptical that whatever they're hearing is, as they've said, you know, is going to lead to another October 7th massacre. And I think I want to listen more to what their fears, their concerns, their skepticism are versus the glad handing, the, you know, rainbows and unicorns that you may get from leadership. It's not going to actually happen.
Yeah, again, it goes down to the kind of the second and the third people in charge of things, the ones actually in the room doing the negotiating, actually putting terms onto a piece of paper. That's the people I want to hear from, not the person who takes the kind of the curtain call at the end. You know, everyone loves a lead actor, but, you know, it's the rest of the ensemble play a very big part in these in negotiations. I don't know about you, but when it comes to Trump, my thing with him when it comes to kind of wanting to do the deal with places like Iran or with Hamas is he learned a lesson in Iraq that a lot of people didn't. You can't just keep killing the leader. You've got to do a deal with somebody, because it's actually the leader that keeps the rest of the, you know, the circus in line. You need somebody there. And Trump has yet to find that person in either Hamas or in Iran or in any of these kind of states right around the world that actually has some element of control. And I think this is where people keep saying, oh, well, he keeps threatening to bomb and then he doesn't and all this kind of stuff. I think he's really trying his best not to kind of, you know, take out the next round of leadership and start this all over again. I don't know if you agree with me on that, Steve, but it's just my sense on this one.
Look, we and the UK have had a big problem for decades, maybe for centuries. We replace bad guys that we have a problem, who are leading some country or some area, and we replace them in so many cases with worse guys. And I think President Trump is learning that lesson of, you move one guy out, and the next guy may actually be worse, harder to deal with, and you can only go down so far. Now, there is an advantage when you go from the starters on the pitch and you start going to the bench, and they're not nearly as good as the lead guys. That can give you an advantage, but they may be even more adamantly committed, more willing to martyr them than the first round were. So again, you have to have a pretty good sense of what comes next. Now, I'm in the line right now of you cannot trust what the Iranian, Basij and the IRGC are doing. I'm more in the you've got to bomb the living daylights out of them. They may still hate you. They may still want to attack you. But if you knock out their power plants and their resources, they'll hate you by candlelight. Yes. They may still want to hurt you, but they'll be throwing rocks in the dark. So let's move to put them in the dark, so at least we remove their ability to cause the chaos and harm that they're doing on a daily basis.
Can I just say, I am so nicking that line. That's a great line. They can throw stones in the dark by candlelight. I think that's a great way of actually understanding what Trump is trying, I think, eventually has got to do. Because we can't have a situation where the groups like Hamas or Iran can rearm, and we just do this all over again. It's the definition of insanity. And the West has been doing it again and again and again, expecting a different result. And I don't understand it. Is it just that big fear of they don't want some bad press headlines, and they don't want that to be their legacy? Is this the reality of it now, that we're more concerned with how we're remembered than what we do?
I think that's part of it. I think they want, to have a solution that's neat and clean. I mean, you guys have the sitcoms and the dramas and the crime shows in England. And at the end of an hour or 30 minutes, they wrap it up very clearly. Okay, it's all packaged in 1 hour. International affairs, foreign affairs, conflict are not so neatly wrapped up. They are messy. And I think that sometimes, we've got leadership that want to get a nice, neat package wrapped up. We solved the crime, go to commercial, we'll be back next week. And that's not how it works.
I could not agree more. I think we really have to understand the concept of a never-ending war. Well, I think that's all wars, if I'm being honest. I don't think they really end. They just find a different way of being fought. And yeah, as jolly as that is, Steve, I hate to be the miserable one, but thanks so much for joining us. Don't worry, Alex will be back next week, so you don't have to panic too much. But again, thanks. That's Steve Gill, former White House official who served under Bush and Clinton. We're talking all things Hamas, talking Iran, we're talking the future, we're talking security. That seems to be what the central theme of this show seems to be, because I'm still asking, will the Ceuta migrant invasion be the turning point in Europe's open door? And up next, I've got Andrew Allison. I'm going to have shift gears a little bit on this. Andrew Allison, head of campaigns for popular conservatism, and we're going to be talking all things polling and the parties and what's actually happening right here at home. I'm Peter Barnes. This is Talk. Stick with us.
.49,000 people are leaving Morocco because apparently it's war-torn. But Jet2 this morning are offering 20% off a trip to Morocco for a week. Which country in Europe wipes everybody else's backside but its own people? Here.
This is a huge football story, folks. UEFA has now said no European nation will participate in any FIFA competition so long as proposals to create a company to run the World Cup remain alive.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. Oh, good afternoon. Oh my God, I keep doing this. I don't have no idea why. We're getting through it. I'm Peter Barnes. This is Talk. Welcome to mid-morning. I'm filling in for Alex Phillips. Now, for those of you who may not have been aware, the Manchester mayoral election was held on Thursday. We got the results yesterday. Now, everybody is focusing in on the 25% turnout. Now, that is very important. But there is also other little bits of detail that I think actually need to be talked about, particularly for those of us who sit on the right of politics. Because I couldn't help but notice that when you add together the Reform vote, the Restore vote and the Conservative vote, we still lost to the left. I find that very, very concerning, even on such a low turnout. Now, I'm delighted to say I'm joined by a man who is a lot smarter than me on this stuff. That's the head of campaigns from Popular Conservatism, Andrew Allison. Good afternoon, Andrew. How are you doing?
Good afternoon, Peter. No, I'm doing very well. Are you?
Well, we're getting through it. We've only got 40 minutes to go and the network is standing, so we'll take that as a win. Now, I hope you'd be... I don't know how much of a nerd you are, but I was one of those people, there's an election, that means polling data, and I'm the happiest person that's existed. Yeah. And I was wondering if you could maybe talk the audience through kind of what bits of this kind of election has actually been kind of brushed over because it's not part of the big headline figures. You know, I'm looking at the Restore vote that's overtaken the Tories, which, I mean, that is significant. If we're going to get down to the brass tacks of it, we're looking at the Reform vote backslide. We're looking at lots of different things, particularly on the right. I mean, we always keep saying this tiresome little phrase of unite the right. I can't see it happening, you know, before an election, but do you think we're starting to see the necessity of it now?
I think we need to start with the turnout, which was pitifully small at 25%. But let's just forget about that for the time being, because really the percentages haven't changed. The Greater Manchester area is a left-of-centre area. Labour was always going to do very well here. And of course, when you put second preference votes into all of this, I mean, you can vote Green, you can vote Liberal Democrat, you can vote for any left-of-centre candidate and still put Labour down as your second preference, and it's still going to count. So that's that. Roughly 2 out of every 3 voters in the Greater Manchester area, and this goes back to the start of the morality back in 2017, tends to vote for left-of-centre parties. So in that respect, that hasn't changed at all. And you're right, I'm pleased you picked up on this because I did earlier. When you count all the votes for the Conservatives, Reform and Restore, there's still a good sort of 10% behind.
It was a lot higher than I felt comfortable with. If I'm being, I have to admit, I don't, you know, obviously, like you said, the Greater Manchester, I'm from that area, and, you know, I understand it's always a soft centre-lefty kind of area. It's always kind of going to be. But for me, there's a lot of seats around that area, parliamentary seats, that, you know, aren't shifting to the right like a lot of people seem to think that they actually are. That's my big concern here. We're letting narrative and wishing kind of overtake the thinking, if I'm being honest. I don't know if you agree with me on that.
I see where you're getting at on that. And of course, in certain constituencies, the vote will be a lot tighter. So if you have on first past the post, you have, for example, Labour getting about 40% of the vote, and then you start getting Reform on 25 and the Tories on 23 or 24 or something like that. And that's when it actually really starts creating problems for the right. But of course, that did happen in 2024, the general election, where Labour won a lot more seats simply because the right of centre vote was split between the Conservatives and Reform. And you're right. I mean, I talk about uniting the right a lot, and I think it's something that we definitely need to do. And perhaps when we go through by-elections and we go through other local elections next year, and we start looking towards a general election, which I think will be earlier than 2029.
My money is on November.
Your money is in November.
Yeah.
I have said that this year is a possibility. If it's not going to be this year, it will probably be next spring.
Yeah.
But as we start getting closer, and of course, none of the parties have really got candidates selected, Peter.
Yes.
I mean, that's the other thing.
Apart from the Labour Party. That's my thinking. They're the only people that are ready, realistically, because he just restarted the MP.
They are. Because they've got over 400 candidates. So, for example, under Labour Party rules, so I've read...
your life is about as interesting as mine is, if that's what you're reading.
Well, exactly. If Andy Burnham were to call a snap general election, under Labour Party rules, the existing MPs, those who have the Labour whip, over 400 of them would automatically be reselected as candidates. So they've already got... around about 2/3 of their candidates already, whereas the other parties are miles behind.
100%.
So that's what could happen. But I'm just hoping, as we do get closer to a general election, and we're now starting to stare down the barrel of a general election, we realise that we're just going to let Labour win if we don't unite in some way or cooperate in some way.
Yeah, I think that's the key word. We need to go from uniting, because let's be real, I always joke around, you get 10 Tories in a room, I'll give you 38 different opinions on something. You know, the idea that we can actually, live together on the same house is ridiculous, but we have to be good neighbours and live on the same street. That's how I'm kind of phrasing it now. We have to learn to cooperate, we have to learn where to put resources and make sure our candidates on the right are actually able to win. So we're not fighting our own side as much as we should be fighting somebody else, is how I kind of like to put it. Rather than the idea that we all come under one umbrella. Nonsense. It's never going to happen. Too many egos, too many cooks, all of that stuff. But we have to have, like, non-aggression pacts, I think they used to be called back in the day.
Yeah, I see what you're getting at there, and you're right, because our natural opponents on the right are those parties of the left. It's Labour, the Greens, the Liberal Democrats. And we need to really understand that and focus on that. I don't know what you think, but I get the impression, and I'd have to see statistics on this, that the Conservatives criticise reform just as much, if not more, than they do the Labour Party.
Oh, I completely agree.
And we need to move away from that.
Yes,
because
100%.
although the Conservatives and reform have differences, and we live in a democracy, and as a free marketeer, I believe in competition. So yeah, let's have that competition, a competition of ideas. But we should never forget that our real opponents are on the left.
100%. We forget that all the time. They are really good at the left, not just here in the UK, but around the world, are putting differences aside when it comes to elections. They are able to work together. This is why my big fear isn't a Labour majority, it's a rainbow coalition. I think that is still very much on the cards this time, more than it's ever been threatened before. Do you know, was it Theresa May and the coalition of chaos and all that kind of stuff? I think that is more of a reality than most people would like to admit, because I think that's the stuff of nightmares.
Well, like you, Peter, I read all the polling data as it comes out, and I have done month after month after month. And all that highlights is that a hung parliament is more likely than anything else. I think it's unlikely that Reform will get a majority. It's even less likely the Conservatives will get a majority. But I don't think Labour will get a majority either. And we've got to also understand that when you look back at elections, which I have done since 1979, the country as a whole has voted towards the left.
Yes.
The only reason that Margaret Thatcher won her majorities in the 1980s was because she was leading the only party of the right, and the left vote was split. There's only one exception to that, and that is in 2015, and that was because of the collapse of the Lib Dem vote after the coalition, and also the rise of UKIP, and that was the only exception since 1979. So we've got to get wise to this.
Andrew, if we ever meet, I'm buying you a pint, because you're the only person that has actually ever explained that, other than I keep doing all the time, and then I just get abuse on Twitter for pointing that out. But yeah, but you're so right, because the marketplace of the right is a lot different than it was under Thatcher. It's a lot different than it was under the coalition and even under Cameron. You know, I keep calling it the credibility crisis. The right is very good at saying what is wrong. We're not very good at saying how we're going to fix it. And more importantly, we don't sound like we're in charge or we've got real grip on the issue. We've got the right answer, but you know, you head of campaigns over at Popular Conservative, how do you think the right in each party, whichever one it is, can actually focus in and convince the public that they're the ones, that they have the actual credibility to fix something? Because I always say, pick one thing, fix it, you're in power for decades.
Well, we at Popular Conservatism want a restoration. It's the so-called Starkey thesis, Dr. David Starkey working with us, where we wanted to remove from the statute book all the Blair-era reforms that have basically taken power out of the hands of elected politicians and put them into the hands of civil servants and elected judges and various quangos. Now, 2 years ago, that looked like a fringe sport, if I may phrase it like that. But now it's becoming very mainstream and people are realising. And indeed, I think Keir Starmer realised, even though he championed the system for all his political life just about, he started to realise that the Prime Minister didn't have as much power as he thought he had. And you know, we've done interviews with Jacob Rees-Mogg, who said that he never found civil servants particularly obstructive, but they would say, "Minister, you can't do that." Why? Well, it's the Equalities Act.
Yes.
It's the Climate Change Act, and he will go through. And there was all sorts of legislative roadblocks in the way. That certainly needs to be done before any party can do anything, and they have to acknowledge that. Reform does seem to be coming around to that pretty much. The Conservatives are starting to come around to that as well.
I couldn't agree more.
And if we can unite on those.
Yes. Let's find one thing we can all agree on. Maybe that the sky is blue. Let's start there. And maybe we can actually end up in the same room. But, Andrew, thanks so much for joining us. I do need to flick to a break before we can talk to the big boss over at Popular Conservative. That's Mark Littlewood. Stick with us after the break. He's up next. We're talking about the economy. We're talking Ceuta, migrant crisis, literally everything, because I live by WWML. What would Mark Littlewood do? Let's find out after the break.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, I'm Peter Barnes. I got it right that time, for those of you keeping count. And welcome back to Talk. I'm Peter Barnes. I'm delighted to say I'm going to get straight into this because he's one of my favourite people in politics. He speaks so much common sense, and I don't understand why he isn't the Prime Minister. I think we would be in a lot better state. As I said, I always say WWML. It's what would Mark Littlewood do? Mark, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Hi, Peter. Thank you for the very kind introduction.
No,
I'll try and navigate us out of the country's disastrous state of affairs at the moment.
Well, no pressure. You've got 10 minutes. Let's see how far we can get. Probably a lot better than our emoji of a Prime Minister, because I saw today that John Healey, the Chancellor, the one that surprised all of us about getting that job, I'm not going to lie, that one did put the cat amongst the pigeons, has told Cabinet Ministers to prepare for budget cuts. Call me a sceptic, but I don't think the Labour Party understand what the word cut actually means.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Peter. There is no appetite in the Labour backbenches for trimming at least the key items of expenditure. It's worth, when you're looking at the budget in the whole round, to bear in mind that if you look at our welfare spending, healthcare spending and education spending, you're getting on for 2/3 of all of the budgetary expenditure. So you can find cuts elsewhere. I don't know, reduce arts subsidies or something like that.
Don't say that. There's a Labour backbencher that's just got into hysterical fits about that.
Yeah,
you know,
well, exactly.
Some migrant in an army camp now can't do, potato
Modern
crimps,
dance, yeah.
Modern dance. My lord, there'll be pickets. There'll be pickets and there'll be letters. You know what they're like.
Yeah, exactly right. So, look, you've got to, I mean, my basic math here is that you've got to look at those three areas of spending. You know, if you can't dampen down in one or more of those areas, we're going to continue to be in a budgetary position that spirals out of control. And it's worth putting this in a much wider context, right? So this year, we're on track for a budget deficit of £130 billion. That's the amount that the government will spend over and above tax receipts. And the really worrying thing is you have to go back a quarter of a century. You have to go back to 2001 before a government of any stripe balanced the budget. So we've had a quarter of a century of living beyond our means. Very often people sort of say, well, we don't want austerity. Well, we haven't had austerity.
Yes.
We have had largesse.
Yes.
We have been living beyond our means for way, way too long. Austerity is if you are spending well within your means. You could spend more, but you decide not to. You put it away for a rainy day fund. Well, we've been nowhere close to that. This is largesse. Now, the problem that Healey's got is that Andy Burnham has already rolled out a whole plethora of spending commitments that weren't calculated to be in the budget. And to meet those, he's going to have to try and find some spending cuts or do a little bit of mathematical sophistry when he presents the books to show that he really is fiscally in control, because I think we're heading for budget deficits to continue to grow. And if you keep spending money like there's no tomorrow, one day there will be no tomorrow.
Oh, don't say that. I mean, I've been the most depressive person on this network for all afternoon. It's ridiculous, but I couldn't agree more with you. By the way, in 2001, I was 11 years old, so put it that way. That's how long I look like this now because of this government and multiple ones before it that I have to keep paying and paying and paying. But I find it fascinating about the word you use there, the choices. The actual governing is you have a series of options in front of you, and successive leaders in lots of different parties, even at cabinet secretary level, have continually chosen the easy route. Yeah. They've continually chosen the easy... But I also say, and this gets me into a lot of trouble, the public chose the easy route as well. We rather liked the fact that money was going into our pockets that had, just been printed. And I do think there's a lot of kind of soul-searching within the nation to say maybe, just maybe, we have to learn to spend within our own budgets as well.
Yes, I agree with all of that. I mean, to be honest with you, I think when the stark figures are put to the public, they're willing to face up to them. The problem is that the governing party, and indeed it's fair to say politicians of all stripes, have not put the cards firmly on the table. So the message being given is, well, we're the fastest growing economy in the G7.
I think I'm the fastest growing economy in the G7 at this point, at one point. I think we all take it in turns. When you're at school, you got to take home the class pet. That's what you get to take home at one point. You get to be the fastest growing economy in the G7.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, we're all moving at a snail's pace. So there's a sort of spin on the good numbers, but I think really no political party has yet had the guts to spell out that the spending position we are in is unsustainable. We cannot keep going on like this. And it's not just, Peter, that, we've been running up budget deficits and spending beyond the means of taxpayers for 25 years. The demographics are also against us, right? So we've got an ageing population. We haven't put any money away to pay for public sector pensions. The social care issue, it's great that people are living longer and longer, but it adds to social care costs. So if we do nothing, the default position is that our fiscal position will deteriorate meaningfully over the next 5, 10, 15 or 20 years. If you like, the trajectory is the automatic sort of fix that we got in the system is that spending will go up. So you're absolutely right. We've got to start to decide what our priorities are. And too often the government says everything's a priority. If everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. We have to make some trade-offs.
Wasn't it Keir Starmer that had 13 pledges, 5 milestones? He had all these kind of markers, and yet I don't think he hit a single one of them. The one thing I will say for Rishi Sunak, he said, judge me by these 5 things. The public did, and he lost his job. I think Keir Starmer rather suffered the same fate. But I think you bring up a really good point here about the kind of the priorities of government. Obviously, defence of the realm, number one. Even John Healey has failed to get the 3%. And, that was his big kind of resignation moment. Arguably, I think the end of Starmer. I think that was the kind of the final nail in the coffin for him. Once the kind of the crutch of defence kind of disappeared, so did he. Thank you, John Healey, for that service. You will not be forgotten. But now he's Chancellor, he seems to have failed in, securing what he wanted to do in the first place. And I find it fascinating and infuriating. We're still having arguments about defence spending. Just give them the money.
Yes, I'm with you, Peter. My top priorities, if I was Chancellor of the Exchequer, would be 1, defence, and 2, the judicial system. Right, our court system is in tatters because the key. The absolute key duties of a government, the first things it should do is to protect us and make sure that we actually have a decent and working and functioning judicial system. And it's ridiculous at the moment, the delays in our court system. Now, those 2 things, actually, defence and justice, are not colossally expensive. You're not looking at NHS-style budgets. These are relatively easy to fix, a rather small proportion of the overall budget. But to get there, I think the only way we can do this is to start with a blank sheet of paper about our welfare system. Welfare is ludicrously out of control. We are spending, north of £300 billion a year on just shuttling.
All these numbers give me stomachache every time you say one.
It's absolutely unbelievable. So you're looking at, let me just do the maths quickly, it's something like £15,000 per household in the UK, something of that sort of magnitude. And you would think for that, how is it we haven't cracked poverty with that sort of budget, right? As Ronnie Reagan was fond of saying, somewhere there must be some overhead. You would have thought that this sort of expenditure, poverty would be a thing of the past. So I think just dialing up welfare spending even more, given that the colossal amounts don't seem to have fixed the problem of poverty, is the wrong way of looking at it. And I think we've actually got to get back to the founding principles of the welfare state in the Beveridge report, where Beveridge, a kind of lefty liberal, no hard righty himself, said that the purpose of the welfare system had to be to provide people with levels of subsistence support, and only temporarily. Well, we spiralled way out of control there. So I think we just got to start again with welfare and have, you can't necessarily deliver a short, sharp shock. You probably need to bring in changes over, give people 6, 12, 18 months notice of what's coming down the line. But we have to knock tens of billions off that bill. And we know for a fact that the Labour backbenchers were not even willing to, if you like, dab the brakes at all. Yes. They were not even willing to see.
They just hovered over the top of them. That was all. That's as close as it, and they freaked out at that. I couldn't agree more. My favourite quote by any economist was Milton Friedman. It says, "There's nothing more permanent than a temporary government programme," and the nation has taken that to the nth degree. We went mental with that because I think it's all right. Beveridge, he's not exactly going to sit with Nigel Farage and that that era of politics, but even back then they understood that it's not supposed to be a lifestyle. My bigger fear is that people actually in the political establishment use the welfare system to make a voter base. To keep people trapped in poverty, because that's a consistent and regular vote to stay in power. I think that is what actually needs to change somehow, and I don't know how you could do it. Take the politics out of it. In other words, politicians shouldn't really be making these decisions.
No, that's right. As they say, if you rob Peter to pay Paul, you can be pretty sure of Paul.
Oh, they've taken enough from me.
No, we need a complete rethinking of it. And you're right, when you have a state this big, it's really politics becomes about client groups. It doesn't really become about sorting the fundamentals of, of the economy, of having a robust and safe country. It's all about who gets what slice. I mean, the way I would start to approach it, this would take some time. It would take, probably a full generation to come to fruition. But we've got to get back to what the real meaning of national insurance was. Your national insurance contribution, the concept was you're forcing to insure yourself against, accidents, being out of work, being sick. Could also be money to be put away for your pension. But of course, national insurance contributions essentially are just poured into the same bucket as general taxation. I think the way out of this is actually to be very, very clear that your NIC contributions are earmarked for you. Yeah. So you, Peter, could log in, type in your national insurance number, and you'll see how much you've got in your pot. And it should be ring-fenced for you, so you can save for your old age or for, any accidents or mishaps that might happen, rather than it being general taxation. That was the initial principle of national insurance. We've moved away from it, and I think a sensible welfare system would re-embrace that initial concept.
Yeah, it's always baffled me a lot why people think there is a pot with their name on it already. Yeah. I mean, we got all the condiments and poured it into one big mix. That's what we did. We had a house party, you created what we used to call the house mix, and it was basically all the bits of vodka and everything all poured in together. That's essentially what our entire welfare system has become, because we started to kind of pay, like you said, we've stolen from me to give to Paul, and therefore, when eventually it comes around that something happens, there's no money left. Everyone keeps always using the NHS back in under Blair as how wonderful it was. Yes, because you used all the money up. There was no constraint. And this is what I keep toying with the idea, and I don't know if you agree. We have to start putting some kind of legal limits on the government's ability to print money, on the government's ability to spend. Is this where we're heading now, that we simply cannot trust, what is essentially, the drunk teenager with the car?
Yeah. I think that's exactly right. It's quite difficult to do it within our constitutional framework, but some sort of legal obligation to hit a balanced budget, I think, would be more than welcome. And I'd actually even go further than that. One of the things is you never hear a politician saying, look, actually, this year's been pretty good for the UK. So rather than spending lots of money, we're putting some aside for a rainy day. We're going to build up a sovereign wealth fund. Never, ever does that happen. No. The assumption is that the sun is always going to keep shining.
Ironic for Britain,
isn't it? There's no attempt to mend the roof while the sun's shining. So we've got to completely flip it on its head. Now, look, if democratic politics doesn't do this, Peter, the markets will do it for you. Yeah. The UK is increasingly seen as a riskier and riskier place to lend money to. Look, you can still borrow on the open market. People will buy government bonds. The British government's not expected to default on them. But wow, at a premium. People in today's world would rather lend money to Greece than to the United Kingdom. That tells you about the lack of credibility that the UK government has on the money markets. And that will keep dialing up. We're now just servicing our debt, just servicing it, not paying off a single penny of it, Peter, just servicing it costs more than the education budget each and every year.
Well, isn't that a rather depressing point to end on? But
Sorry
again,
not to have cheered you up, my friend. But
trust me, I've yet to find a single guest that has. Everything has just been, it's all falling apart, it's all terrible. But this is the important bit. We keep bringing this to the public's attention, because eventually, I do believe, and I did the weird thing, and I agreed with Nigel Farage today, we will wake up eventually. People will wake up. We will wake up.
I think that's absolutely right. Yeah. There is medicine and surgery that can solve this, but we need to be honest that we need to take the medicine and have the surgery. If you are dishonest about that, the illness gets worse and worse.
I could not agree. And on that point, Mark, thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stick with us here on Talk. Last section is handed over to you. I want to get your calls, texts, messages, WhatsApps, everything, smoke signals. Let's get them all in. I'm Peter Barnes. Join us after the break. I want to hear what you've got to say.
49,000 people are leaving Morocco because apparently it's war-torn. But Jet2 this morning are offering 20% off a trip to Morocco for a week. Which country in Europe wipes everybody else's backside but its own people? Here.
This is a huge football story, folks. UEFA has now said no European nation will participate in any FIFA competition so long as proposals to create a company to run the World Cup remain alive.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to Talk. I'm Peter Barnes, filling in for Alex Phillips. We're in the final stretch to 1 o'clock. Thank you so much for sticking with me. And apparently there are lots of nice messages that people are enjoying the show. There's a great message, though, and I have to read this out because I think it's fascinating. This is from a guy called Ernie. And Ernie is a Reform UK supporter. And he says here, "Hi, Peter. I've just looked up Bev Craig, and she was always going to win. She was Burnham's wingman and was probably the one who did most of the hard work." That I do agree with. She came across as a genuine person who has the best interests of Manchester in her heart. I think the result was the right one. Now, is there a rare moment of parties coming together? Is Ernie leading the charge of finally unifying the nation? And all it took was a woman nobody's ever heard of, an election nobody voted in, for us to actually care about. Well, sorry, but I love that, though. I think that is what we need more of. You might disagree with somebody's politics, but if you think they're in it for the right reason, let's give them a fair shake of the tail before we start to tear them down, shall we? Anyway, let's get right back into it. This is your section. As I say, let's go to Phil in Hertfordshire. Good afternoon, Phil. How are you doing? Apparently, you're somewhat sceptical of the turning point for Europe.
I'm good afternoon, Peter. Yeah, I'm doing well. It's nice. I'm enjoying the sunshine. Yeah, I am sceptical, Peter. I mean, they say, are they going to wake up? Is this a wake-up call? Look, let's look at this realistically. All right, let's break it down. You've got 60,000 people massing on a border, and no one saw it. No one observed it. In the days of the surveillance that we've got now, we've got satellites that can read what book you're reading or read the print on your newspaper, blah, 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 heat-seeking cameras, etc., etc. No one saw 60,000 people massing on a border. Come on, Pete.
Oh, I'm with you on that one. We talked to Sir Richard Dearlove, who's former head of MI5 earlier, and MI6, sorry, and he's literally said this has been an open loophole and a backdoor into Europe for a very long time. The idea that nobody, with a pair of binoculars, let alone a satellite, or even by the looks of it, 60,000 people, you could look with your own two eyes. And you're telling me, I'm with you on this one, that they didn't see this coming. No. It just rather stinks, doesn't it? And yet again, it is the ease to which they feel they can lie to us. That's what concerns me most, is the people that are supposed to keep us safe can't even tell the truth.
I know. We talk about we could do this and we could do that and they could do this and they could do that. I think that time's over, Peter, for talking. We want to know why now. What are you actually doing and why are you doing it? Not what you could do, because whatever solution or advice they come up with, it's never done. It's never done. It falls on deaf ears. I think we've got to focus on now why. Why?
Yeah, I think that's really good, actually, because not also why are you doing certain things? Why aren't you doing something else? What is your actual reason for not tackling the migrant crisis? It's been around a while. There's been lots of ideas on how to stop it. You look across in America, Donald Trump did eventually solve this problem rather neatly. Yes, they've still got ongoing problems in America when it comes to the impact of the migrant crisis there, but he was able to protect a border. I mean, at what point do we suddenly have to realise that we just don't really want to fix the problem, that our leaders are not really interested in doing it? Because politics and governing is about choices, and if you continue to make choices in one direction, it's not an accident when something like 60,000 people break into a country.
I know. And I think the time is over, Peter, for actually recommending, well, why don't you do this and why don't you do that? We have to focus now on a more direct route and a direct line of pressure. Why? Why are you allowing it? And when they deflect and they go off at a tangent and they start talking word salad, which they all do, we bring them back to that question.
Yeah.
Why? We don't let them get away with it. We've let them get away with it for too long, Peter. And,
yeah, trust me, I've worked for those people. I was there for a lot of it. Trust me, the amount that most people don't even realise is coming around the corner is terrifying, because it's not just on the migrant crisis, it's on the economy, it's on healthcare, it's in education, it's everything. This is what has really shocked, I think, the Starmer government in particular. When they came into power, it wasn't just that one thing was broken, it was everything was breaking in a bad way all at once. And yet they went into power with no plan. That can never happen again. No government should ever go into power without an actual costed and plan, but with a timetable. I don't want airy-fairy kind of, oh, well, we'll do it in a year, we'll do it this, we'll do... No. I want timeframes, because timeframes gives me markers for success. And if you don't hit them, why? That's how you do it. You say, I'm going to fix this in this amount of time, on this amount of money. Private business has been able to do it since the invention of capitalism. That's what they've been able to do. And yet public sector and our governments, successive ones across the party landscape, haven't and aren't willing to do that. I find that very, very concerning.
Absolutely. And the thing is, Pete, I'm going to ask you and all your listeners, are you surviving or are you thriving?
Oh, at this point, I don't even think I'm surviving, if I'm being honest. But I think Gloria Gaynor is singing me a song. Apparently, I will survive. I highly doubt that by the end of the show.
Exactly.
But honestly, Phil, thanks so much for joining us. It's a great call. Please do call again, whether I'm on or whoever, because that was a great contribution. I really do have to say. I just want to flick just back to one of the messages here. This was from a little while ago from Mark, and he just said, I just passed a news agents and saw the headline, "Wake up call for Europe. Those who have enabled this are going to wake up. They are in denial and determined not to accept reality. The only way to escape our doom is to replace them as a matter of urgency and establish governments that will act in proportion to the threat." That is exactly what Phil has just been arguing as well. It is so important that we actually start to take this seriously, because I don't think they do. I think it's just numbers on a spreadsheet. This 60,000 is just 60,000 to them. You know, they don't understand that when you watch that image and watch that footage of them breaking into Spain and the Spanish authorities being overrun, that is a concern to people. That's about feeling safe. But I want to flick to John in France now, who thinks Burnham has to go. I don't think you're alone in that, but how is France doing at the moment? I hope you're nowhere near the border.
Hot. Very hot. No, I'm nowhere near. With regards to these Moroccans, I think a lot of them will just come to France. I don't think they'll go much further. There's a big community of Moroccans in Holland.
Yeah.
But I don't think they will come to the UK, personally. I don't know if they got 5 grand on their hip either.
Yeah, I got to say, there was, on this, there was a report, actually, to be fair, that said that roughly 40,000 were from this kind of situation were going to apparently make its way. Now, that may be a little bit hyperbole, let's be honest. That's a big number to make a claim on.
I never go to the UK.
But I think, realistically, I think it is the image of what happened that I think has shocked so many people and continues to shock. I think seeing, as I said, the forces overrun who are supposed to protect you be just useless. And, you know, the Interior Minister may have said that all resources were used to make sure this was a calm situation. I'm not quite sure. The footage rather shows that to be true. I don't know about you, John. What do you think?
Well, I think is that if they've let people out of their prison to do this, I think this is an act of war.
Now, I've always found the fact.
War.
Yeah, I have to admit, I do. I start to wonder whether France stole our money, if I'm being brutally honest, because we gave them a lot of money to stop the boats coming. Okay. They rather pocketed that, didn't they? Because the boats are still coming.
The idiotic socialists.
Yes.
In our country and tourists, they're all the same. They're idiots. They're dangerous idiots as well.
That's so true. We always keep thinking that it's stupidity. I don't think we could keep saying that, if I'm right. It's dangerous. It's people's, you know, it's homes. It's because I think people were breaking in Spain. People were breaking into homes, you know, and making. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Until senior Labour MPs, children, or wives, or sons are, you know, what's been happening to other people. I'm going to use the word. If their kids get raped, their wives get raped, that's the only time they're going to wake up. They don't care about the English people.
Yeah, I can understand how people feel like that, and a small part of me does rather agree that, you know, this has to rather be parked at your front door to realise the horror of it. Otherwise, it's just another headline.
Is when they're gone, and it's so easy to stop it as well. Two ferries in the channel, just bring the boat